Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with an album review as we typically do, where I look through an entire album, going track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and how it impacts the larger whole. Today, I'm definitely going to have my Spanish pronunciation tested, as we're going to be looking at some Jorge Drexler. And the album is Amar la Trama, and the genres are singer-songwriter, pop, jazz pop, folk pop, Latin. Covers a lot of bases, but also a lot of overlap between those. Came out in 2010. Now, all of the lyrics were hand translated for me, so I really appreciate that. And I got a little bit of background on both the artist and this album that I want to go over a couple of key points before we go into it, so y'all are on the same page that I am. Jorge is a singer-songwriter from Uruguay. He released 12 albums so far that cover several genres and styles, though many are rooted in his Hispanic traditions and pop. He became a big name in Latin America after winning an Academy Award for Best Original Song for Al Otro Lado del Rio that he wrote for the movie Motorcycle Diaries. He also studied medicine prior to getting into music full-time, and he specialized in something I can't pronounce. His prose mixes poetic writing and scientific natural imagery. So that's going to be interesting. It also says he plays around with metric and verse structure and rhyme. So I'm kind of hoping... I'm not going to be able to pick up on the rhyme. Just looking at some of the lyrics for the first track, the translated lyrics, yeah, I think the rhyming is specifically going to be in Spanish. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk too much about that, but it is interesting to hear that he plays around with rhyme. Now, this album represents a bit of a shift in his sound. His first 4 albums were mostly traditional singer-songwriter fare, but his 4 albums after this one went into folktronica. So this is a sort of an isolated sound, I'm going to assume, that's not similar or not exactly identical to what he had worked on previously, and not really like where he went afterwards either. It's also the first time he played alongside a full band, and this album was recorded live in front of a small audience, with some minor tweaks and overdubs for the studio version. Well, not studio, but for the CD release. It says that the audience is mostly absent, but they do contribute to a couple of songs. And it's not necessarily a concept album per se, but we are looking at the concept of Carpe Diem, which shows up throughout much of this album. The translation of the title of the album is To Love the Plot, and it actually comes from a line in track 2. It says, to love the plot more than the ending. Kind of living for the moment. We do have some concepts of mortality, fatherhood, love, and searching for a place in the world that are going to show up in here too. So lots of really possibly heavy topics on this album. We have 12 songs ahead of us, about 46 minutes in total. Not sure why that says 11 seconds in. Must not have updated that after I did the volume check. Whatever. Let's dive into this first track. 3,000 million heartbeats. I'm not going to try to pronounce that title in Spanish. I know I'm going to botch it. So a nice 5 right here. Got some horns.
Estoy aquí de paso, yo soy un pasajero. No quiero llevarme nada, ni usar el mundo de cenicero. Estoy aquí sin nombre y sin saber mi paradero. Me han dado alojamiento en el mar.
It's interesting that as full volume as this section is, it is so quiet and empty.
Si quisiera regresar Ya no
Love the little
sabría
touches
hacia
over there.
dónde. Pregunto al jardinero y el jardinero no me responde. Hay gente que es de un lugar, no es mi caso, yo estoy aquí. De paso.
When did we shift to 4?
El mar moverá la luna, o la luna la.
Was it just the intro that was in 5
Se
then?
nace lo que es, o se será aquello en lo que se crea. Yo estoy aquí perplejo, no soy más que todo.
So interestingly, the right side here is really just keeping the groove. The left side is giving us the atmosphere.
Si quisiera regresar, ya no sabría hacia cuándo. El mismo jardinero debe estárselo preguntando. Hay gente que es de un lugar, no es mi caso, yo estoy aquí. Yo estoy aquí de paso.
Fun rhythmic stuff going on around here called a response, adaptation of interesting way to end that track. All right, so while it's still fresh in my mind, at least, the end of the song, the horns, it had that ba-da-da, and they just kind of hold that out. But when they shifted to that da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, that really rhythmic thing, you listen over to the left, I don't even know what instrument it was, but they were doing the da-da-da, but instead of holding that out, they'd come back down, and they created this rhythmic groove out of that movement. They expanded it and converted it from something that feels light and airy into something more energetic and punchy. But it wasn't one of the brass either. They had moved on to the da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So this was maybe the guitar over there. There's a lot of things going on, and there's going to be a couple details I'm a little vague on. But yeah, I really like that. They transfer the idea to another instrument and modify it ever so slightly, not just for the sake of modification, but this song is taking off. It has new direction, it has new rhythm, it has new punctuation to it. And so this older idea gets adapted to fit within the new context through the adaptation of hearing it in a new voicing. Yeah, just very cool idea. And it's kind of wild to me that the song is, there's some depth to it. There's some nice use of layering and textures, lots of instruments going off in places across this track, but it never really picks up until the last 40 seconds. And then there's all sorts of more intense complexity going on for it to just stop. I'm really intrigued about that. Maybe the lyrics will lean into that a little bit. I wonder if I should keep up with the lyrics. I think because the verses in this section, in this track, were pretty mellow, especially the first verse, which was very light percussion, very light guitar strumming on the outskirts, and then the chords on the main acoustic guitar and the vocals. It was a very minimalistic idea. I probably could have read the lyrics, although would I have known where I even was? I might not have known where I was in the lyrics, so that might not have helped anyways. By the time I got around to recognizing the structure, how would I have found where we were in the lyrics? Anyways, I don't know, maybe we'll see how the music goes. If it retains its simplicity in parts, I may read or I might try to keep up with the lyrics as we're going through. As I've said before, I have very rudimentary Spanish, but I should be able to pick up a word here and there and try to keep pace that way. I don't think it's impossible, but it will be trying. It'll be pushing my understanding of Spanish to its limits. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, like I said though, the end gets more complex, and I find that to be really interesting because it's the end. When I really began to get engaged in what was happening compositionally, the song just abruptly ends. I was actually concerned that we were going to roll over into the next track, and I didn't want to. There's things I wanted to bring up about this one that I didn't want to forget. And then it just didn't. Very surprising. Minimalism though. I do want to focus on this. I think both of the verses tend to bring the energy down quite a bit. We start the track off in a 5/4. There's some cool brass going on. We have some nice rhythms, rhythmic complexity, the little bit of not super complex, but there are polyrhythms going on in the intro. And then we never hit that 5 again. The energy comes down. As I mentioned, we drop it to just like a guitar that does texture on the left, percussion mostly left and center, hand drums though, not a drum kit. And then center we have the strummed guitar for the chords and the vocal line. That's kind of it. I wouldn't say the beginning was high intensity, but compared to this verse, yeah, I mean, it was pretty big, pretty layered. So we have this energy here, complexity on top of volume, on top of layers, and we bring all of that down. And then we bring it back up for the chorus. We bring back the brass. We bring back the layering of the guitars. We bring back catchiness too. I mean, that's when the brass come in with that da da da. So like, that sounds great. That's a cool little idea that plays off of some of the other melodic elements going on here. But then after this chorus, we bring it back down again. It's a really nice pacing through the song. I wouldn't necessarily call it maximalist versus minimalist, but certainly more layered versus less layered. Higher intensity versus lower intensity. More things going on versus less things going on. And we have this roller coaster until we hit the end, and it decides that the peak that we were at wasn't enough, and it just keeps going, adding more complexity, more intensity, more energy. It feels like a party there at the end. And like I said, the pacing generally is good. I was just surprised at the end that we continued to take off when there just wasn't time left for that. But I bring this up particularly not just to say, oh, there's contrast in this track, but because I really feel like this is the difference between something a bit more isolating or vulnerable or lonely versus something more surrounded by people and party-esque. I don't know that the chorus in particularly screams party to me, but the end does. Once we kick in that da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da rhythm on the brass, which I don't think that's particularly right. I think I've begun to forget the exact idea that they are doing. But anyways, once that kicks in, the energy of the song spikes. I mean, this to me sounds like you're surrounded by people. It's a good time. The brass definitely give me a party vibe. They always do. Dude, hang out with trumpet or trombone people and tell me they don't bring the party every time. And so, what is this song then? If it's an alteration of isolation or vulnerability or pensiveness versus more extroverted ideas of socializing is kind of what I get out of it. I don't know. That's something I've been thinking about though while listening to this track. The other thing I want to bring up, and I don't have a lot to say about it yet, but I will be paying attention to it as we go on, is rhythmic complexity. This one didn't have a lot of it, but we did have a little bit of polyrhythm in that opening section, which was really interesting paired with the 5 pulse. I kind of want to go back and listen to that to see if that really was 5 or if I was mishearing that, because it doesn't come up anywhere else. I'm so perplexed by that. Maybe that's that metric playfulness that Jorge has. I don't know. That I was really expecting more of that 5 to pop up, and at a certain point I just realized, no, dude, it's just 4 all the way through now. But we do have some rhythmic complexity at the beginning, and I'm particularly going to be looking for, just to use a giant blanket term, Spanish rhythms. And I know that kind of doesn't mean anything because of how many different cultures musically exist under this umbrella, but I don't know specifically Uruguayan rhythms. I'm not going to make any assumptions about what I'm going to hear, but I am going to pay more attention to rhythmic devices and see if I can't hear any patterns across them that maybe I could hypothesize might come from his culture, from Uruguay and their musical history. Because it does say that the person who requested this said that a lot of his music is rooted in Hispanic traditions and his Uruguayan culture. So, actually, it's rooted in Uruguayan folk and Spanish language songwriting traditions. Those were the exact words. So I'm going to see if I can't find any rhythmic devices that might pop up a bit more that stand out to me a bit as maybe not necessarily unique. I don't know if that's the right word, but different than what I normally hear. That's a weird phrase for it too. But I don't know, just going to see if anything stands out to me. And maybe because usually after like a few tracks, I'm going to explore some background information about the album or artist. Usually go look up something on Wikipedia or Genius sometimes has comments about albums and artists. Just kind of go look for some stuff. I might also look into rhythmic devices popular in Uruguayan folk and see where that might take me. I don't know. I'd like to expand on this though, because rhythm is very important to a lot of Spanish music, and I don't want to completely miss that, especially since this is based off of folk. So that's where I'm at for this first track. Kind of a simple idea in general. It has nice depth and complexity to it. It isn't just a simple song, but it does lean more towards the simplistic element, focusing on, particularly to me, rhythm, catchy melodies, and atmosphere more than anything else. Oh, real quick before we hit lyrics though, what's with the placement of instruments on this? I noticed that particularly off to the left, that's the rhythm section. I don't know if it's particularly bass and percussion. I think I heard guitar over there, but it was more palm muted rhythm based guitar than purely harmonic chordal strumming guitar, which is center channel. Off to the right though is usually the atmospheric stuff. It's the slides, it's the chords, everything that's going to give the emotional flavor to the track. This is very unique, or at least unique to my ears. It may be actually very common for the culture. I don't know. I can't say I've listened to a lot of music from Uruguay before, but this split, it's a functional split. It says you're this group of instrumentation, you're playing rhythmic things, so we're going to put you off on one side. And you're doing atmospheric chordal stuff, we're going to put you on another side. And lead vocals, center channel, that's the only thing that really makes sense to me. And I'm curious if this is going to be something that we see going forward often, or if it was something that they just wanted to do particularly for this track. Although if this is recorded from a live recording, it's possible that this is just where they're set up on the stage too, which I'm just now considering. I assume everyone would have their own mic and they could place everything wherever they wanted in post, but it could just be that they're miking the stage and this is just the direction that the instruments are in the performance too. Which would make sense, because I don't have a lot of experience playing in an Uruguayan folk group, but I do have experience playing jazz, and your horns are in a different set of the stage typically than your rhythm section. So your bass, your piano, your drums, they are going to come from one side of the stage versus the horns are just going to come from another. Now, granted, when you're actually in the area, especially if you're further to the back of the performing area, all of it kind of mixes together eventually before it hits your ears. So this might be a place where speakers might be a better way of listening to this than headphones. But I'm also going really deep into the audio acoustics of the album based off of just 3 minutes of music. So I'm going to get off of this right now. We're going to head into lyrics, and this is just going to be something I'm going to keep on my mind as we go through the album. All right, so the division between isolation and groups, or, lighter, more ambient music versus more intense music with more layers, we actually see that here. This is a song about somebody who just travels. They don't ever stay anywhere too long. It says, I'm passing through. I'm just a passenger. I don't want to take anything with me or use the world as my ashtray. I'm standing nameless, not knowing where. I've been given lodging in the oldest greenhouse. So the oldest greenhouse is Earth. At least I think that's what he's alluding to there. He just lives anywhere he can. He sleeps where he can, and then he travels. And I would wager that if you're always passing through places, never really making connections, you're going to end up spending a lot of time alone during your travels, but sort of lonely when you meet people too. There's that distance, right? Because you're going to be heading out. You don't want to form anything too strong of a bond with people, because in a couple days, a week, whatever, however long you're going to be chilling here, you're eventually going to move on. It says, if I wanted to return, I wouldn't know where. I think that's interesting. Journeys usually have a start. Take Lord of the Rings. I don't know why I'm going this direction. The Shire, though. The hobbits will journey away from the Shire to destroy the ring, and the goal then would be to return back here. To return home is the phrase here. Home isn't necessarily used in the lyrics, but it is sort of implied. The place that you can call your own. He says, I don't even know where that would be. This journey never really started anywhere. It's just always been. He says, there are people that belong somewhere, but not me. I'm just passing through. And that appears to be the chorus here. If I wanted to return, I wouldn't know where. There's people that belong somewhere, but not me. I'm just passing through. I think that explains a lot of the ups and downs on this track. We also have, though, this second verse, possibly maybe a bridge. No, I think it was a second verse. Says, does the sea move the moon or does the moon move the tides? Are you born who you truly are or do you become what you believe in? I'm standing here astonished. I'm all ears. If I'm lucky, I'll stay here 3,000 million heartbeats. I've been trying to figure this out. What is 3,000 million heartbeats? But is he trying to talk about his life in time? Says, if I'm lucky, I'll stay here. He passes through everything, but maybe he's found a place to call home. He'll stay here for 3,000 million heartbeats. That's a lot of heartbeats. But he also talks about fate versus, being in control. And he says, does the sea move the moon or does the moon move the tides? Who's in control of that relationship there? He says, are you born who you are or do you become what you believe? Are you destined from the beginning or do you get to shape who you are? There's a lot of questioning in here of, well, it's very philosophical. But what is the 3,000 million heartbeats? I mean, if we were to write that number down, I think most people would just say that it's 3 billion. So 3,000 million, though, that's just not a typical way, in English at least, of representing that number. And it makes me wonder if there's some cultural, turn of phrase here that I'm just not privy to, something I don't understand. To me, that the first time I read the title, 3,000 million heartbeats, I was like, that's 3 billion heartbeats. That's a really odd way to say that. But maybe that has meaning. I mean, there's definitely some stuff I say that at face value doesn't make any sense in English, but it's a phrase that we use. In fact, often I say it's not my cup of tea, or, this song's up my alley. Up my alley? What does that mean? Yeah, means I enjoy it. Maybe back in the day when the phrase came around, it made sense. There's some context to it, but nowadays, I don't really know why it means that it's something I enjoy. I'd have to go look that up. Maybe that's what's going on here. Something that's a little awkward on the surface, but has meaning to it past that. We're going to move on to track 2, the plot and the ending. I love the 2 guitars here.
Camino por Madrid en tu compañía, mi mano en tu cintura, copiando a tu mano en la cintura mía. A paso lento, como bostezando, como quien besa el barrio al irlo pisando, como quien sabe que cuenta con la tarde entera, sin nada más que hacer que acariciar aceras. Y sin planearlo tú acaso, como quien sin quererlo va y lo hace, te vi cambiar tu paso, hasta ponerlo en fase, en la misma fase que mi propio paso. Oh, ir y venir, seguir y guiar, dar y tener, entrar y salir de fase. Amar la trama más que el desenlace. Amar la trama más que el desenlace.
Dude, I love the groove on this.
Fue un salto ínfimo, disimulado, un mínimo cambio de ritmo apenas, un paso cambiado y dos cuerdas que resuenan como un mismo número en distintos lados, o el paso exacto de los soldados, como dos focos intermitentes, súbitamente así, sincronizados.
I'm trying to catch the emotion on this too.
Han conseguido que el reloj de arena de la pena pare, que se despedace.
There's a warm joy in it,
y así seguir el rumbo que el viento trace.
but it isn't like super out there. Sort of a withheld happiness.
Dar y tener, entrar y salir de fase. Amar la trama más que el desenlace. Amar la trama más que el desenlace. Por ahí, como en un film de Eric Romer, sin esperar que algo pase. Amar la trama más que el desenlace. Amar la trama más que el desenlace. Te vi cambiar tu paso hasta ponerlo en fase, en la misma fase que mi propio paso. Wow. Por Madrid en tu compañía.
Yeah, okay. Dude, that's just a feel-good song right there. It's laid back, it's sort of withheld. It isn't exceptionally outward pouring joy and happiness, but it is a very happy track. It's very comfortable, it's very laid back, but it's happy. And it's in these little harmonic twists, little flirty uplifts. It's just, it is tasty. The brass give it a lot of energy when they come in too. I think this really propels it upward a little bit and gives it a bit more clarity to its emotional resolve. But I also wonder how much of it is like cultural too, because like in America, a lot of American music, especially if you listen to it's in the pop realm, the mainstream realm, it's very overdone. It can't just be a happy song. It has to be incredibly optimistically joyful. It can't just be a sad song. It has to be depressingly melancholic. We really take things to the extremes. And I find it interesting in a track like this that because it's a bit more nuanced in its approach, I had a tough time really locking into that emotional resonance for it. I think I'm getting a little better at it. I started to realize, this is a bit more of a muted emotion. It's present. You can certainly feel it. By the end of the track, it put a smile on my face. It just sounds so warm and centered. But I had to begin to understand that that's where it's going to be. And that's where my mind is going to be going forward, is trying to find more of these. I think muted is the wrong word, but it feels right to say, but more restrained maybe. That also feels like it's withheld though. That it could be larger, but isn't. It just feels real in a sense. Does that make sense? Like if we were to say that American music tends to be very filmic, very over the top, very theatric. This is more real. This is what real joy and happiness tends to be. I'm enjoying it right here. And I quite enjoyed this track. And like I said, it's little things in his voice, little upticks, little harmonic pushes into a brighter sound that really sell me on this this feeling of happiness, of joy. Musically, though, this follows along with what we saw in the first track. We tend to have some muted verses with more larger bombastic choruses. The brass tends to come in the bigger parts of the track. We have less layers in the verse. It's a bit more condensed. I'm curious if this also is going to line up well with this track's themes lyrically, or if this is just the way that we're going to experience songs with a nice rising and falling of the pacing, and it just happened to line up with the first track rather well. I don't know, when we hit the lyrics, we'll figure out what's going on there. But I don't know that there's a lot that I would say particularly about this song that I didn't bring up last time. There's still some really cool rhythmic devices in here. We still have the rising and falling action, energy, and layering going on in this track. The placement of instruments is still the same, and it still has some great rhythms and a wildly catchy melody too, especially in the chorus. There is one thing though that stands out to me on this one a little bit more than the previous one though. And I think it's the chord progression. I'm still trying to figure out where exactly it is in the music that I get this vibe from. But it's the warmth of it. The first track, it certainly wasn't a cold song, but I never described it as warm either. This one feels very comfortable. It feels safe, but not like safe versus eclectic or experimental in the type of music, but the feeling of safety while listening to the music. The last track probably didn't have this because the person didn't have a home, something to return to that is theirs. Their safety was in the journey itself. But this song continues to return back to this safe, warm comfort. It's the chorus, and it always feels excellent to return to. Something about it just feels like, I don't know, a warm hug. It's great. Every time I got back to the chorus, as soon as I heard the first chords kick in, the extra instrumentation, the first couple of syllables that Jorge drops, yeah, this is it. It's going to put a smile on my face. I'm going to look dumb. I'm going to look goofy, but it's just going to be this big smile because it just feels so right to be here. And part of this is the contrast too. Everything else removes some of these layers. It removes some of these harmonic devices. It removes some of these timbres. It's not a worse off feeling. It's not like removing towards loneliness or somber or isolation or anything like that. It's just less of the thing. And so when we build back into it and get the full thing, it's like, yes, dude, this is what I was missing. Just a lovely feeling right there. Yeah, let me hit some lyrics on this one. We'll move on to track 3. Beautiful. This song is about finding someone who just fits into your life and you just fit into their life so well that it makes life different, more colorful, more vibrant. It says, I walk through Madrid in your company, my hand in your waist, copying your hand in mine. Slow like a yawn, every step in the neighborhood like a kiss, knowing you have the whole afternoon to do nothing but caressing sidewalks. And you, without a plan, went and changed your pace, aligning your steps with mine. So it's about two people in a relationship going through the city. Nothing on their to-do list, just exploring things, seeing where the city takes them. And then the part where everything syncs up. It says you went and changed your pace and aligned your steps with mine. We actually see this show up a lot in the second verse. It says it was a tiny shift in pace, two strings resonating, like the same number showing in two dice, or the coordinated steps of marching soldiers, or two strobing lights suddenly in sync. Two dopey walkers have managed to slow down the pain hourglass and just follow the path of wind. This idea that two separate pieces now connect, interlink so seamlessly that they work together in tandem. The beauty of two independent people coming together to form one larger whole. The chorus states, to go and return, to continue and guide, to go through the different phases, to love the plot more than the ending. It's not about getting to the end of this story. It's about existing within the story. It's about seeing where your life takes you and enjoying the moment. Yeah, that's just a beautiful song. And that idea of finding warmth, I guess the term here would be connectivity. Something I don't think I would have come upon without the lyrics, but to find that connection with someone, that you can call them home, that you can find comfort and warmth and joy in their company. Yeah, that's just a beautiful track right there. And so far, we're only 2 tracks in, but that's my favorite of the first 2. Let's dive into track 3, which translates to The Passerby. I love the variety of sounds coming out of this. We have a lower string, a higher string, we have the hard percussion of the strum.
Y ella busca algo en su cartera y yo me digo ya llegó la primavera y la maceta enfrente se llenó de brotes y allá abajo el barrio se llenó de escotes. Y la tarde se escapa, verso adentro y yo sigo buscando sin encontrar mi centro y pongo ladrillo sobre ladrillo y sigo sin dar con el estribillo y entonces me pregunto ¿qué es lo que viste en mí? ¿Qué es lo que te hizo abrir así? Tus miedos, tus piernas, tu calendario, las 7 puertas sagradas de tu santuario, la extraña luz de tu cámara oscura, el infranqueable cerrojo de tu armadura. Las transeúntes
That's 3 string instruments there?
Tienen el deambular sincronizado y van haciendo su coreografía con las rodillas del color de la alegría. Cada farola tiene ya su bailarina y la banda viene entrando por la esquina.
Ooh, what? We have some woodwind in the background that sound like whistles, cheers from the crowd.
Enseña la cintura y el tiempo enseña que hay cosas que no se curan y las musas huyen.
I really wish I knew where we were in the lyrics, because I want to know why that turned into a
que va a
parade.
quedar a medias y entonces me pregunto ¿qué es lo que viste en mí? ¿Qué es lo que te hizo abrir así? Tus miedos, tus piernas, tu calendario, las 7 puertas sagradas de tu santuario, la extraña luz de tu cámara oscura, el infranqueable cerrojo de tu armadura.
Oh. Right?
¿Qué es lo que viste en mí? ¿Qué es lo que te hizo abrir así? ¿Qué es lo que
I can't believe this song's almost over already. It just started.
hizo abrir así? ¿Qué es lo que viste en mí? ¿Qué es lo que te hizo abrir así? ¿Qué es lo que viste en mí? ¿Qué es lo que te hizo abrir así?
I don't know if it's like this on the vinyl or the CD. Where the songs stop, kind of, they're random. Tracks 1 and 3 run right up to the end, almost to the point that I thought they were going to transition into the next tracks. But track 2, there was like 6, 7, 8 seconds of silence at the end of that one. I wish there was just a little more consistency, just for the sake of doing this. I don't think it alters anything in the casual listening experience. I'm just, I have to figure out if I'm letting songs roll over, when to pause them or how to pause them. And that's not something most people need to worry about, but it's a little aggravating, I think, on my end. Wonderful song, absolutely gorgeous. And I like the extra variety on this one. Once again, we have highs and lows. The verses tend to be a bit lower. The choruses are bigger. Here's something really cool though, and I want to really touch on this. 3 songs in, about a quarter of the way done with this album, I'm really picking up on this compositional structure here. We don't really hear too much of a difference between the foundational elements of the verses and of the choruses. And this is really important to crafting what I kind of want to describe as sonic painting. The way that I see most of these songs, actually all the songs so far, is that the most simple, minimal parts of the track are the backbone of the song. They give you the rhythmic vibe, they give you the atmosphere and emotional vibe, and they give you a little bit of extra complexity on that. We never just have 2 guitars strumming chords. There's usually 2 different guitars, at least, doing 2 slightly different things, creating a little bit of syncopation between the 2 of them. This gives you emotion, harmony, melody, no, not melody, and rhythm. It's everything you need to know to understand the song. It is the core components of the music, not just on the musical side, but how to understand it, how to feel it, how to anticipate what is coming ahead of it. Now, we do see on track 1 a little bit of subversion of this, where we do have a little bit more of an introspective part of this more minimalistic sound that is contrasted by a more upbeat, dancey part in the chorus of it. But still, that bass idea is still there, because even in that track, we still have the the nomad, if you will, the person who's just constantly going from town to town, never really stopping or staying anywhere for too long. Even when they are in there and they begin to form friends or whatever, it is still temporary. They are still by themselves. Eventually they will leave. They can't create any sort of ties or relationships to people that is very deep at all. So we have this base idea. Then there's usually the layers. These don't really change too much about the song, but they do embellish on what it is aiming for. And this is usually what we see in the first chorus. This is where we get the extra instrumentation that just adds on to, fills in the blanks, expands on, grows, and further dives into most of the same feelings that we see in the verse, in the more minimalistic parts. This is really where we get our verse chorus structure, from the more minimal to the more layered. The foundational aspect of it, the spine of the song, doesn't change much between these two. It's really about how and what we add on top of it. That's mostly focusing on an expansion and a deepening of the same ideas we presented in the more minimalistic part. But there is a third layer to all of this, and we typically hear it towards the end of these tracks, usually in a final chorus or a lead up into an outro. And it's what I call the accentuating ideas. This was the horns coming in at the end of this song with a new lick that we hadn't heard from any other instrument. It adds on to and embellishes on the track. It can add new emotional qualities to it, but it usually also fills in more of the blanks, any sort of space that was left over from that extra set of layers that we heard. Any of those spaces will be filled in even more so here. This is where we begin to hear some of the more complex ideas like call and response, of context, recontextualization, of theme and variation. This usually shows up towards the end of a track. We don't usually hear this accentuating layer in the beginning or middle of the song. And what this does is it sets up the bass vibe, the bass atmosphere for the song. You can understand what it's going for. It expands on it, really leans into those emotions. And then at the end of the song, it changes things up for, one, the outro. So it can be a peak to the song. It's the most layered, most complex, most emotionally dense part of the track, but also to further expand on some of this and even contrast and change some of those feelings or emotions a little bit for impact. It is both storytelling and compositionally strong, a great way to push the song forward throughout the entirety of it without ever really needing to change too much about it. And I think that's what's fantastic. The backbone of the song never really changes. The core aspects of the track never really change. It's the ornamental ideas, it's the layers that get put on top that help recontextualize or add information to that original component of the music. And it's just a really genius way to go about writing a song. It allows it to feel exceptionally comprehensive and cohesive because it is just the song. You're not really jumping between different parts. But it also allows it to feel anything but stagnant. It allows it to feel anything but shallow or minimal or underbaked. It constantly is evolving in ways that support what it's trying to do, trying to say. That evolution can come through in like pure evolution of just growing and expanding on what's already there, but it can also come through in subvertive ways like we saw on track 1. And I think it is a phenomenal way to go about writing music. And if that's what we hear on the entirety of this album, I will be here for it, because so far Jorge has shown a fantastic aptitude for writing music in this way. And as much as I enjoy songs at the beginning, I find the outros to consistently be the highlight of the song, which makes sense in both the narrative and compositional format or perspective. This appears to be the key point. This is where the song really hits its stride. So I think it's pretty cool. I also want to talk about the vocals a little bit. I've picked up a little bit of this on previous tracks, but it really cemented itself on this one. There's a lot of syllables and a lot of words in some of these sections. There are moments, especially in the choruses, where Jorge kind of takes some time, slows things down, and holds some notes out. But a lot of this comes off with a very quick tongue, very quickly moving between syllables and words. I wouldn't necessarily call it spoken word, but the delivery is quite a bit faster than most American pop. And I think that's very interesting because it doesn't come across as spoken word. It doesn't come across as rap. It is still very deliberately sung. There are still pitches. There's a lot of pitch movement going on. It isn't just like he sits on one note and just delivers a bunch of words, monotone style. There is movement. There is melody to the way that he speaks. He just gets these syllables out faster. It's not so much a focus on quarter notes, but maybe eighth notes, sometimes throwing in the 16th note run. There's a lot of syncopation to it too. There's almost a hyper focus away from rhythmic rigidity in the vocal melody, trying to find ways to create rhythmic groove out of just the lead melody, which makes sense for Spanish music, which is very rhythmically focused anyways. We can hear that in all of the ways that the guitars, even not even looking at the percussion instruments, which are rhythmically interesting too, but even looking at your rhythm and your chordal based instruments, they're still going to be rhythmically interesting. So it's just a big part of this culture's music, and to find that in the lyrical element as well. Like, it's something that I've always kind of known. I wouldn't say I listen to a lot of Spanish music, but I do live in a Spanish community. I do hear a lot of it. And it's just something that maybe I've internalized, but I don't think I've ever like thought about and put that into words. But Jorge right here is, I mean, especially with this track, like I said, there's a lot of syllables being thrown out. And it works really well as another rhythmic component alongside the percussion, alongside the foundational elements in this track. The guitars that are already playing rhythmically, contrasting ideas and bouncing around each other rhythmically, and lots of syncopation in there alongside the percussion. You have the vocals that are also doing this. So it's very cool to see the vocal aspect also tying into the rhythmic identity of these songs. The guitar solo. This song features Jose Miguel Carmona on flamenco guitar. He did an excellent job on this. Absolutely loved it. It did catch me a little off guard because the picking is very heavy-handed, and it kind of contrasted a little bit with the picking timbres that we've had on the guitars previously in the album. But once we got into it and I got past that one little hiccup, like, the composition is solid. The storytelling in it just pulls you through the whole solo. There is a little bit of, in the metal world, we would call shred, but faster guitar playing going on at the end, a little bit of showing off. But it's also very tasteful too. It felt like we built into it naturally, and it continued on a lot of the melodic storytelling that we had begun this section with. It was also contrasted nicely with some longer held out legato notes at the beginning that also were contrasted against those very sharp staccato tones, especially with the harsh picking. And overall, it just feels like a highly dynamic exploration in this song. Also, when you bring in the elements of like volume in it as well, you'll find that it's just incredibly dynamic and it sounds great to listen to. And I totally got lost in that moment. And when I opened my eyes, there was like I don't know, 20 seconds left in the song. I don't know what happened. Time got warped and compressed once we hit that bridge, and like 2 minutes went by in no time at all. So I was totally lost in that guy's playing. Excellent stuff. As far as like emotion, storytelling, what I think the song's about, I don't know. I didn't really pick anything up on this one. It might be that it was just a bit too nuanced, or maybe just a bit too subdued of an emotion for me to pick up. Like I talked about in the last analysis segment, things just aren't as overblown on the surface, over the top emotionally on this album, and I'm kind of having to dig a little bit more to get what's going on there. But I did quite enjoy this track musically. On like a compositional analytical level, there is a lot of complexity going on in here while still being incredibly listenable and palatable, which walking a very fine line there and just pulling it off with ease almost. I don't know how he makes it look so simple, but absolutely. This is complex, but palatable, digestible, easy to listen to. Let me hit some lyrics on this one. I think there's some lost metaphor in this track that translation just doesn't quite capture. It exists in three parts, honestly. The verses are split into two stanzas each, and the chorus explores its own thing. The first stanza of each verse shows our narrator leaning over their balcony, watching people on the streets below. The second stanza showcases their writer's block. The chorus ponders what redeeming qualities they have. They do it in a roundabout way, though. The thing is, though, is that there's a lot of reference to the female body in this song lyrically. And so there's almost this element of attraction possibly to the different parts and themes of this track. Like I said, I think like some of it's seeping through the translation, but I think some of it got lost in it also. I wish I knew enough Spanish to get this track and be able to read the original language lyrics, because I wonder if there's anything I'm missing in there. The first stanza of the first verse states, "Watching the passerby from my balcony as if I were taking notes. She searches for something in her purse, and I tell myself that spring is here. The pot in front of me is full of sprouts, and below the street is filled with cleavage." Now, I wonder if this isn't supposed to be a double entendre, though. Maybe with spring, that clothing is more revealing, but it could also be about the street itself. Maybe it is a stone street, and there's deep cracks between each of the stone pieces of it. It's an older street rather than like an asphalt street. He says, "The afternoon drifts in verses, and I keep searching without finding center, putting stone over stone, and I can't find a chorus. So I have to wonder." And we'll see what he wonders in a moment, but I want to head to the second verse before we get into the chorus. As I mentioned, the first stanza is about being on the balcony. He says the passerbys are quite organized, going around in full sync, and they move in choreography with their knees colored by joy. Every streetlight has its own dancer, and the band comes marching round the corner. So he's viewing other people. And he sees everybody just working, everyone just being, interlocking, and existing together in happiness. And he brings it back around, second stanza, writer's block. The afternoon shows its waist. Another double entendre, waist as in the midriff of a person, but also that he's wasted this afternoon. Once again, using imagery of the body alongside maybe another meaning that's a bit more, I don't know, surface level, like actual physicality of it. He says, time teaches that some things won't heal, and muses run away if you insist, and this will be another half-written song. So he's on his balcony, he's having a tough time writing, and art is the expression of the self. He's having a hard time figuring out what he wants to say, who he is, what kind of art he wants to present. He looks down and sees a bunch of functional people, though, just going about their lives, full of joy, and here he is, stuck in this room, unable to express himself. And this takes us to the chorus. He says, I have to wonder, what did you see in me? What made you open up like this? Your fears, your legs, your calendar, the 7 sacred seals of your sanctuary, the rare light of your camera obscura, the impenetrable lock of your armor. He says, you totally opened up to me. You told me about your fears. You allowed me into your life. You opened your calendar up. He says, you allowed me to enter into your sanctuary. You took your armor off and were vulnerable with me. Why? What did you see in me? What redeemable quality made you think that you should do all of this? It paints the picture of somebody who feels like they're having poor self-image issues, maybe just at this moment, but maybe in general, trying to figure out why they're worthy of someone's time like this and vulnerability. They're trying to write music, they're trying to be vulnerable themselves, but they don't know what to write about. There has to be something about them that is interesting. I mean, this other person was interested in them, right? You just can't find it, you can't figure it out. And so the entire chorus is about this other person, this you. Every sentence is about this other person being vulnerable and opening up. But the chorus is actually about the narrator. They want to know what it was about themselves that had the other person exposing themselves so much for them. Maybe if they knew that, they could write something. But as the second stanza, or the second verse says, this will just be another half-written song. The muses run away if you insist, and time doesn't heal everything. The end of the song is a constant repetition. What made you open up like this? That is the core part of the song. They feel lost. They don't know what to do next. They're trying to be themselves and tell people who they are, but they don't really know at the moment. Not anything worthwhile, anyways. I like it. I think it's a rather powerful song. I think it's really interesting, too, that somewhere in this, there's this beautiful guitar melody that shines through. The song that wasn't half written is inserted into the middle of this track. Now, granted, the song itself isn't half written either. But I also had a hard time getting an emotional read on it, too, and maybe that's it. Maybe it is this element of confusion, of being lost, not quite knowing what you are. We're going to push forward into track 4 here. As a snowflake in a snowball, la nieve en la bola de nieve. Yeah, I'm going to get some of these. The first 3 were a bit outside of my linguistic agility, but some of these I'll be able to get. Let's dive in. Very smooth, the psychedelic waviness to it. Bass guitar just cementing the foundation here. Subtle crescendo on the...
Una nostalgia donde se condensa el rocío. Un paso en falso hacia un remolino en el río. Cualquier contrasentido hoy cobra sentido y se vuelve dilema.
That's a fun line. We'll explore that in the lyrical section.
Anhelante, que hoy piensa solo en la mitad faltante. Una insistente desazón que no entiende razones.
There's interesting rhythmic variety on his lines too. Some vocal lines being longer than others.
La mínima brisa como si fuera un ciclón desquicia la veleta de este corazón. Sin paciencia, mira el cristal del freno de emergencia.
We got some bells with the horns. We also have a full drum kit here. This, I think, is the darkest sounding song so far. This vocal stuff is really neat and how it lines up with the lyrics. Once again, we'll touch on that. All right. This is a somber track. It stays consistently light throughout as far as energy and layers. We have a couple of sections where it kind of pumps up a little bit, but for the most part, it's very somber and light. Even the end of the track, which in other songs has been the peak of the song, we don't really get that here. the peak is this quiet, somber, introspective tone. Very different from some of the other tracks, but it does share some similarities too. I don't know if you had this in mind, but were you listening to how the foundation of this song doesn't really change much? It's just rather consistent. It's how we build on that, what we put on top of it, the expanded layers, and then the ornamental layers, or I called them accenting layers for that third layer there. Yeah, this song also had it. So if you didn't pick up on it here, plenty of songs ahead of us, and I'm fairly confident that we're going to see this structure used a lot on this album. So might be something to keep in mind as we push forward. But it is introspective. It is kind of moody too. Throughout the song, uh, our peak, our most layered section, expands on this moodiness and brings in a darkness almost. I said this was one of the darkest songs on the album so far. And of course, right after I said that, we kind of chill back out to just sort of that gloomy moodiness. It's not necessarily dark in those moments. It was the layered section that really carried this weight. But it's still something that feels a bit on the negative side, where most of these songs have been neutral to neutral positive. On my definitely expanded Americanized scale of emotional display, where, it's over the top is the norm, so this feels muted to me. But yeah, neutral positive is where I think most of this is kind of sat. Even on the last track, which had a bit of a negative bend to it, about kind of feeling lost in the ways of like music writing and feeling out who you are, I still felt that musically it was a bit more neutral than somber. This, though, absolutely leans into the somber side of writing and then escalates it into a dark weight. I thought that was very interesting, and this is a good place to put it at the end of the first third. We've sort of been moving towards it already because track 3, like I said, was a bit more neutral, had heavier lyrical themes to it. But here, we kind of take that dip we were on and just completely run it down. I really like his voice. I don't think I've brought this up yet, but I have spoke about it other times we've had Jorge on the channel. The dude just has this smooth timbre. And part of it is that there's no whispering, there's no belting though either. Everything kind of sits in a very comfortable neutral zone for him. It just seems to be not too different from his speaking volume and pitch. I have heard him talk, actually. I watched a little bit of a TED Talk, I think, with him. I might have to find that. Let me make a note of this, and maybe production Bryan will put a link to that in the description or something. I gotta find it, though. It was a phenomenal little TED Talk, and at the end he played a song, and it was just beautiful. The entire thing, like the purpose of the talk and the song itself, of course. But he's actually pretty close to his speaking voice, too. And it's just a very comfortable delivery. Like I said, not really belting, but as I mentioned before, kind of sing-songy too. There's a changing of pitch every once in a while. It creates this ebb and flow melodically, but given a lot of the speed of moving through these syllables, it's less pure singing than your average pop star. And so it feels very comfortable, very soothing. He just has a smooth voice. There's a good reason he uses this as a singing voice too, because it's just smooth. I could listen to this guy talk or sing all day. And it helps a lot of these songs. I mean, the music is gorgeous too. I don't want to put any of that down, but it helps a lot of these songs the time just pass on them. I can't believe, I mean, granted, we're like 80 minutes into this video already, but I can't believe we're already a third done with this album. The songs are just blasting by. And the sad thing is we just finished our 2 longest songs on the album. This next one is just over 4 minutes. Track 9 is 4:18. Everything else is in the 2 and 3 minute range. I mean, the end of this album is just going to blitz, I really think. I don't know, dude. We got through the longest ones already, and it felt like no time at all. It's just very soothing, very comforting, beautiful music. A great way to wrap up this week's theme. By the way, total coincidence. But if y'all don't watch the themed reactions, this week we checked out beautiful music. And yeah, this is definitely beautiful. This is a good way to round up the week. Something else I wanted to bring up here. The bass has a lot of presence on this track. There's been bass in other songs, but it's been the backbone. It sits beneath a lot of the layers and presents a bit of structure and low-end resonance. That's kind of about it, but here it's front and center. You can't miss it. You can't avoid it. I love it. The bass tone sounds great, and for a song that's a bit lower energy, it makes sense for the bass to drive rhythm and harmony. But we also have the drums in here too, which is a bit interesting. I don't think we've had a full drum kit on any of the songs. But we have tom, snare, bass kick, lots of hi-hat work, and a lot of use of the rim of the snare and the metallic parts of the drum kit. We actually don't hear too much drum head being hit. When we do, it's very big and resonant. I almost think the drum kit, especially using the toms, is a bit too powerful in the mix, but maybe those are supposed to be explosive moments. They dominate, but they are rare. And, maybe there's a purpose to all of that. But there's another aspect that pops up in here in the guitars and the vocals too, is the delay. We primarily see it in the final 2 minutes or so of the song. The final verse sees the vocals split out to either end. When they come back together, we have the center sing something, and then it pops up on the left and pops up on the right. We have the guitar play something on one side, and it's echoed over on the other side. The third verse brings in the idea of an echo. It's presented in the lyrics. So I think it's pretty cool that musically, the end of this song is based around something that's brought up lyrically. And we see so much of it in the production towards the end of the song, and it creates some cool Hockets going on at the end. Some call and response, soft call and response in a sense, because it's responding to itself. Usually there's also a dip in volume, so it feels like an actual echo. It also gets a little, I don't want to say chaotic for this album. It gets nuanced and cluttered a little towards the end. And I think the echo it's the reason for it, but there's also a purpose for all of this too. Let's hit some lyrics. And this song is about spiraling mentally, emotionally. It's mentioned at the end of the very first verse that this longing heart can only think about its missing half. So for whatever reason, their love is not with them anymore. It could be the end of a relationship, probably is the end of a relationship, but could also imply any other thing that would end this relationship between these two people. And about how you can focus on so much of your memories that you spin out into depression in the present. The spinning out he mentions is the title of the track. He says, anything can be as softly dangerous as a snowflake in a snowball. The snowflake that lands into the snow on an incline and starts rolling into a massive ball. It's about the spiral. Starting out with, just reminiscing. Dude, remember that time we went and did this? And then having that sorrow build and build until it's overwhelming and all encompassing. And now you're just thinking about all of the things that you miss about this person, all of the things that you did together. I chuckled though. The first stanza says nostalgia condensing like dew. I really like that idea. Invisible, but everywhere. Well, dew's not really invisible, it's just hard to see. It's like a fog. It says a misstep into the rapids of a river, which I think can be comical, trying to cross a fast-moving river, slipping on a rock, and then just all the way down. There's just no stopping for a while. But it's also dangerous, too. This is a very real version of the slippery slope idea. You start on something small, and next thing you know, you're all the way at the bottom. All your progress has been erased in this hike, and this river just took you for a ride. But this next line says nonsense making sense and turning into a dilemma. I love that. When you make up problems that aren't there, you start looking into the relationship. Why was it over? Why did they end it? Why did they say this thing? I didn't think that was a problem. Is that really, do I bring this problem to every relationship that I'm in? And then you start applying it to other relationships. And you're like, oh my God, it's me. I'm just a terrible person. Why do I exist? And this is the spiral. And like what started all of this might not have even been a real concern. You're just reading into everything at the moment. Nonsense making sense and turning into a dilemma. That is so good. The second stanza, a persisting uneasiness that knows no reason. You can't tell yourself to just not be uneasy. You can't tell yourself that it's, what's the term? Can't think of the word right now. Maybe it'll come to me in a second. But you can't reason yourself out of it. You can't use science or knowledge to make yourself feel better. Your emotions are just taking over here. He says, I'm a songwriter who cannot understand his own songs. I'm curious if Jorge has mostly written love songs in the past, and so at moments of heartbreak, he sees a reflection of himself who he can't relate to anymore, possibly. Says the slightest breeze rocks the vein of this anxious heart, looking at the glass of the emergency brakes. I like this line. The emergency brake would be in a car. It's the handbrake. It's what stops the car the quickest. But also in an emergency, you break the glass for whatever you need that's in it, the fire axe or whatever, the fire extinguisher. Whatever the emergency is, you got to break the glass to get the object. So he sees the glass on the floor of the emergency brakes. This thing ended abruptly, and someone thought it was an emergency, or probably the other person in a relationship felt it needed to end now and got the device that required glass to be broken to get. That says so much about how this relationship ended in just 6, 7, 8 words and 2 metaphors. Beautiful. Excellent. I love it. The third stanza, an echo, sound feeding back sound around itself. Obsession spinning around its own storm clouds. Anything can be as softly dangerous as the snowflakes in a snowball. So an echo that grows stronger as it feeds on its own self. This is just feedback in general, sonic feedback. And that's what we hear at the end, the echo. The voice says something, it gets repeated over here, gets repeated over here. Repetition makes it real. Even if it wasn't real to begin with, this could just be nonsense, making sense and forming a dilemma, but you keep hearing it repeated by yourself, sure. But not always through your own words. Your memory, sure, your imagination of this other person at the moment, they're saying it to you, but you're saying it to yourself. You just have a veil disguising that. And yeah, I think this is a great song for explaining that heartache at the end of a relationship and the pain and the sorrow and the spirals that come from it. The next track is called Mundo abisal, which translates to Abyssal World. Let's dive into this one. Okay, that's kind of fun.
Ella entra, cierra la puerta tras de sí y cruza el cuarto en diagonal. Parten dos escafandristas en la penumbra, rumbo al mundo abisal. La piel florece, fosforece, va dejando una estela.
Almost building a Hocket off of the percussion.
Todo pasa muy lentamente.
See, this is another song that just feels very warm and comfortable. Maybe even a little hopeful.
Inmersión, inmersión, cerremos las compuertas. Aventurémonos hacia las inciertas profundidades. Inmersión, vayamos verticalmente a la deriva, dejando que el vértigo nos acaricie, viendo
Very cool
alejarse
rhythmic
allá
device
arriba
there.
la superficie. Inmersión, bajar y bajar hacia las alturas, donde apenas dura la luz del día, donde reina una oscura sensación de algarabía.
Love the vocal layer in here.
Las ganas mías, la daga fría apretada entre los dientes, la draga clarividente de la melancolía.
Yeah.
Extrañas criaturas resplandecientes, tan lejos de lo común y lo corriente, muestran los dientes en el mundo abisal.
A random romantic era flurry. Oh, the slow opening of the door. Another basslet section.
Ella entra, cierra la puerta tras de sí y cruza el cuarto en diagonal. Parten dos escafandristas en la penumbra, rumbo al mundo abisal.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot to like about this song. I feel like it moves back to some of the earlier atmospheres, tracks 1 and 2. More of a neutral vibe. This one feels very hopeful, though, at times. Not really carrying much of that warmth that I've been hearing lately, although it's still super smooth. All the instrumentation, the timbres, the vocals, all of it just still sounds great. But it's kind of missing that warmth that I had felt in the first couple of tracks, and is focusing on something else here, and I can't quite pick up on what that is. But I do capture elements of hope at times. I do find it interesting, though, with that horn flurry, the rising and descending quick idea that felt very classical to me. That kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it represents. What else shows up in here? We have some really nice horn work, and I want to focus on this for a second because we actually don't get too much of this. A lot of the horns, as far as I've heard so far on the album, is they're used for ornamentation. We did hear some really nice horn lead stuff, melody writing in the opening track, especially once we got to the end, the passing of the baton and the recontextualization and the expansion of melodies and licks in the horn parts. That was fantastic, but that's kind of the only track we've heard a lot of that on. The horns have typically in the other songs been used for ornamentation, to be something that helps sell the largeness of the peaks of these songs, usually with very simple licks and a lot of swells. I'm finding more and more often that Jorge really loves to get that crescendo slide-in sound with the horns. That loves that. The horns do it so well. Maybe it's just because the horns do it well. You can't really do that on a guitar. You can't change the volume of a plucked string without plucking it again. You get another attack in there. On an electric guitar, you can use a volume pedal or something like that. But it is something that works best with aerophones. Maybe that's why he does it so often with them. Violins could do it too, but I haven't really heard any bowed string instruments on the album yet. Well, the horns are there, though. Let's give it to them. He loves that sound, though. He uses it all over the place. We even heard it in this track. We have the nice rise in and then the fall out. So, I mean, that was the beginning of the track. It's used all over the place. I don't know, I hadn't picked up on that yet. But as soon as I started talking about it, I was like, dude, that shows up everywhere. So that's a pretty cool discovery to make there. But the horns actually get some really nice lines in here. They get to show up throughout a majority of the track rather than just being ornamental and at the peak. And we have a nice sax solo in here, which I thought was very well done. Not as technical as the flamenco guitar solo from a couple of tracks ago, but just as strong melody writing and melodic storytelling in it as I heard in the guitar. I also love the little production device they used in there of the super compressed, fuzzy, sort of muddy sound on the sax to make it sound like you were listening to them through a wall. And then towards the final third of it, it feels like the door opened and you get the full sound as if you're now walking into the room that the performance is in. That was a neat little trick, and I really enjoyed that. So that was cool. Is there anything else in this song in particular that I wanted to bring up? I don't think so. Anyways, I enjoyed it though. I'm kind of hoping to hear a little bit of hopefulness in the lyrics, but even if not, I still think this is a solid track, and this entire album continues to just be very easy for me to listen to. I am sure, as it's only 45 minutes in length, that if I had listened to this casually, without pausing every single track, I would have absolutely blown through this so quickly. I mean, granted, it would have taken 45 minutes, but it would have felt like a lot less. This is just going down exceptionally easy. And I'm really appreciative of that. There's enough to dig into. There's complexity and rhythmic ideas and layering and themes and all that. It's not like it's simple pop music, which has its place too, but it's also something I'm just really enjoying, which is kind of a rarity for album reviews. So, oh, we had Under Oath recently too, and that was post-hardcore. That was right up my alley also. So this has been a good month so far for album review. I hope this keeps up. All right, and here, interestingly, I didn't really get too much of this in the music, but this seems to be a whimsical description of a sexual encounter between two people. Talks about the skin blooming, becoming phosphorescent, leaving behind a trail of aurora borealis. Says the recurring phrase, immersion, to become immersed into something, to become completely overwhelmed and drawn into this one specific thing. Says it's time to venture into the uncertain depths, probably a double entendre there. Says let's go vertically adrift and watch the surface leaving us behind, to get away from everything that's out there and stick with what's just between us here. Says to go deeper into the heights where sunlight barely reaches. A dark sense of joy reigns, your desire and my desire, far beyond from common and ordinary. These fluorescent creatures show their jaws in the abyssal world. There is something interesting in here, though. It says the cold dagger pressed beneath the teeth, the clairvoyant dredge of melancholy. Amidst all of this exuberance, joy, pure desire, there's something else at play here. The cold dagger could be read in a more desirable perspective, but melancholy, I don't think can be. Especially with it being clairvoyant, that there is an understanding somewhere that following this will be sadness of some level, maybe of an extreme level, also using the word melancholy instead of sadness. The song starts and ends the same way. She comes in, closes the door behind her, and moves through the room diagonally. I don't know what this is supposed to represent, but it is the second time we have seen directionality written this way. As earlier I had mentioned that they go vertically adrift. Here we have moving diagonally through the room. It says two divers depart in the half-light to the abyssal world. Being that it starts and ends with two people departing, I'm curious if this isn't supposed to be, I don't know, a look at ephemeral lust. The positivity and the joy of the moment, followed by the melancholy, knowing that it's nothing permanent, it's only of the moment. Tomorrow might be a different person, you'll find that joy again, but it's missing that permanence. It also talks about the world outside of this room being an abyss. Lacking in anything, a void. I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways to read into this, but none that I think the song really qualifies as any sort of like leading story being told. I keep trying to come at it from different angles, and one line will kind of influence me to pull on this thread, but there's nothing else in the song to support it. It ends up taking me nowhere. It's a hypothesis at best. I do the same with another line, and I get the same result. I think that this song does a great job of capturing living in the moment, but also viewing it from the other perspective too. Yes, you're focusing on what do I want right now, but it's at the disposal of what do I need long term. And I find that interesting. A lot of this song, or a lot of this album, seems to be very much in the moment, but we do have a few tracks that focus long term. I think The Passerby is an interesting one that kind of encompasses both the future and the present, but the plot and the ending also does. That's a song that focuses on the here and now, but also how this is going to be a permanent structure in the narrator's life. That the two of these people are so in sync that they continue to support each other and to work together for however long that lasts, but at the time being, it's not ending. But this song is about the ephemeral. It's about something that has a time limit on it. But the idea of the world outside being abyssal, that paints it as a more tragic song than anything else. That the only time you can find light, to find something worthwhile in this void, is a fleeting feeling, a fleeting concept, a fleeting moment. It's a really interesting other side of the coin to track 2. A different take on relationships. We're moving into the back half here at the middle track. Toque de queda translates to curfew. We have a featured vocalist on this one, Lenore Riding. Lenore Writing. Oh no! Lenore Watling. Possibly. Yeah, different spelling in 2 different places. I'm going to guess that one was auto-corrected by Google Documents. Spotify says it's Lenore Watling. So regardless, we have a featured vocalist on this one. Can't wait to see how that works in with Jorge's regular vocals. We have heard some light vocal layering and harmonizing on the tracks, but it's always been secondary to Jorge's vocals. So it'll be nice to see maybe another lead vocal alongside his. Let's dive in.
En tu propia fuente llorará la luna con lágrimas hechas de gotas de seda, haciendo que pese la bruma en la bruma, en la soledad.
The production here is really nice, shifting the vocals to the side, so bringing the side guitar center.
En la soledad del toque de queda, la mano que toca queda suspendida a medio suspiro, apenas del beso, gemido a gemido, se abre la herida y la noche cae por su propio peso, y la noche cae por su propio peso. Por cada rendija el tiempo vuelve a las casas como una humareda en la soledad del toque de queda.
Oh, we got a harmon mute. Oh, no, it's not harmon, it's a straight mute. I love the Hocket on the marimba back there.
Una lengua extraña murmura su precio y otra lengua paga moneda a moneda. Cada trapecista suelta su trapecio en la soledad. Soledad del toque de queda.
Very clean ending there. Yeah, I enjoyed this. Very sultry, very smoky. It's very soothe and darker, focusing on a lot more low-end ideas, focusing on quieter sections in general. We have the bass here. We have that boom, 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 boom kind of rhythm that's present throughout this entire track. It keeps the song pushing forward, but also kind of allows it to stay where it is. There's not a lot of energy to it, but it's still just enough to give us some momentum. The majority of this song, though, is this percussion and the bass and the marimbas off to the side. We have that nice Hocket on the marimbas where if you play both the left and the right pan marimba parts together, you'll get one melody, but it bounces between the two sides in the mix. I'm kind of curious. You know, early on, I had mentioned that the placement of instrumentation might just be how it is on the stage, given that I know this was recorded live. But something like that would be an interesting decision to do. Not just from an engineering side of things and placing these two instruments on opposite sides of the stage, but also, I think from a performance side, to me, the sounds of the instruments are too similar for me to assume that they're two different musicians. So I actually think that this is one marimba part recorded and then it's swapped, panning back and forth, which means that there's a lot more post-production on this, well, at least on this track. I'm going to extrapolate and say probably this album than I had originally anticipated. Or I should say assumed, I suppose. I didn't have much of an anticipation coming into this, but I do think that it was recorded live, different mics on every instrument. And then after it was recorded, the engineer went and produced something that sounded very studio-like. Once again, though, maybe speakers would just create a better experience for this, but having the headphones on, having that hard pan left and right on the marimba, it sounds cool. You get that very sharp Hocket idea with it. It never quite hit a point where I was like, oh, this is a really neat idea. And I really think it's the sharp panning left and right, whereas with speakers, they're coming at you at left and right angles, but not completely, 180 degrees from each other. And I think that's just going to create a better listening experience for that part in particular. But speaking of panning, we also have the two vocalists pushed out to either side, which is great because you can put them both front and center, but then you do have to put a little bit of mixing in there to give one a little more priority than the other, especially since they're very similar in range. And well, timbre, there's distinction there. But if you really want to give them equal weighting, you separate them out so you can still have that sonic separation. You can still hear both clearly, but they're both the most present sound in their area. But then you got to fill the middle in. So we bring the guitars center. We keep the bass center. We keep the percussion center. Just really smart idea overall, I think. Also, if this song has anything to do with two people, like a lot of these songs have, and a division between them, I think the production on this is really going to lean into that well. And that's, sadly, that's all I really have to say about this. It continues on with a lot of the ideas we had seen, although we don't really have that third layer that we get put on for this track, the accentuating layer that tries to redevelop or recontextualize or add even more into the song. We do have a nice solo in the middle, in the bridge, that I thought was well done. As usual, I love the melodic writing on this album. But, it's a song that has a slightly different vibe than the other tracks. It kind of brings back some of the feeling of... Was it track 4, Snowflake and a Snowball? I think so. Kind of bringing back a little bit of that heaviness, that weightiness with the darker tones and the lower pitch range in general, and also just quieter. I think this is one of the quietest songs we've had on the album so far. Not a lot of variation on the instrumentation. The vocals were very similar, like I mentioned, similar in pitch, kind of close in timbre, but distinct enough. I was kind of hoping for something else. Don't get me wrong. I liked listening to the two vocals together and the texture layering there, but I was kind of hoping for maybe call and response or counterpoint or something like that. Maybe even just a little separation between the lines at times. Maybe that's not what the song's going for, but we've already had songs with additional vocals stacking on top of Jorge's. So bringing in a featured vocalist and not doing anything new kind of has me wondering why. It must have been for the timbre specifically of this vocalist, because it does line up with Jorge's really well, and I like the way that their two voices sound together. But it's not like they didn't have any additional vocalists in the band already who could have done this part. So, yeah, that's just my fault for putting expectations on that they weren't wanting to hit. That's not fair to them for me putting those expectations on. I just figured that they would do something a little more, given that they were featuring a vocalist here. Maybe they would have lines without Jorge and we could have some back and forth or something. I don't know. I enjoyed the song, though, for what it was. Let's hit some lyrics. So the recurring line on this one comes in at the end of every stanza. It says, "In the loneliness of the curfew." Which, the way I interpret this is as it's a required time to be alone. And at least for our narrator, they don't want to be alone. Although the narrator is kind of I don't know if it's a single person, as we see 4 distinct perspectives here, but regardless, the person singing doesn't wish to be alone. And this separation in the vocals, I think, really leans into this idea here. In fact, the second stanza, "The hand that touches remains suspended, half a sigh from a kiss." So where the hands normally touch, there is now distance between this. Where the lips would normally meet to kiss, there is just a sigh. There is the breath between them. There is distance physically between these two people. It says, "The night falls down by its own weight in the loneliness of the curfew." It says, "In your own fountain, the moon will cry teardrops made of silk, making the mist heavy in the loneliness of the curfew." So this would be bringing about elements of sorrow alongside the elements of night, which we also saw in the other stanza about night falling down by its own weight. The last stanza says, a stranger's tongue whispers its price and another tongue pays every dime. Every trapeze artist lets go of their trapeze in the loneliness of the curfew. I don't know what this is supposed to allude to. If everything about this song is feeling lonely, having this distance, this space between you and the person you want to be with, what is this idea here about paying or stating a price, having it paid, and then trapeze artists letting go of their trapeze? I don't know. That's just 3 lines, though, out of this track. Everything else makes sense to me. It's the sorrow of distance, of unwanted distance, I think, in particular. Some people don't mind being lonely, but the person here does. It's a forced loneliness. That's the curfew, telling people to be indoors and away from others. The next track is called A Song Brought Me Here. Let's dive into it. Nice to see some strong brass presence and a very full sound right from the get-go.
Varias primaveras atrás, el viento cambió y una canción me trajo hasta aquí. No fue más que un signo sutil que luego creció y una canción me trajo hasta aquí.
This is quite a bit more upbeat than the last couple of tracks have been. We have the vocal layering right here. I love the way the guitar is playing around the vocals here. A little bit of an emotional dip here.
Con el entusiasmo infantil.
It's interesting, this has more of a rock vibe to it than anything else on this album so far. A little bit of a little bluesy twang there.
Renglón a renglón, una canción me trajo hasta aquí. Otro mundo distante, en tiempos de otro cantar. Lejos, lejos, con la mirada en otros espejos, sin darme cuenta un día eché a andar.
So clean. Dude, the guitar over here against the horn run. It's nice hearing more instrumental parts too. And that's a very traditional end to the song too. You know, a lot of this times the songs just end. They sort of just come to a point that is the finale and then it's over. Maybe there's a fade out, maybe there's just an abrupt stop. But here we had that nice harmonic wrap up, the chord progression that shifted to focus on this strong sense of finality and to land on this final resonant chord for the song to end on. I don't think anything we've listened to really accentuates the feeling of ending and finality the way that that song has. Aside from the ending, though, what I find most interesting about this track is its louder, more bombastic side of things. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a bombastic song in the grand scope of music, but compared to everything else on this album, this is massive. It comes in strong and loud. We never really dip down away from that. You look at the volume visualizer over there, and it was like maxed out most of the time, which is not how any of the other songs have been. When you listen to the guitar work, it's kind of bluesy. When you listen to the guitar and drums, you get a strong, classic rock vibe out of that. It's very distinct, very different from everything else on the album. And because of this larger volume and focus on louder sections, I think that's also why we get more horn parts to this track. This is only the second song on the entire album where I feel like the horns are a focus instead of an embellishing element. The horns take over much of the key roles on this track as far as lead melody and lead licks. We have the solo towards the end of the track, or I guess it's... Why am I blanking out on the name of this? A solo for a section. The entire horns kind of get a solo section there. They get to be the only melody playing. The vocals had long been finished, and we were wrapping up the song with this horn and guitar focus. And I really like this idea too. Having the horns be this, the secondary melody aspect to this lead guitar line and having them put on two different sides of the song and sort of dancing around and playing around with each other's parts. It's just fantastic to hear. The horns will play something and then decide to hang on a note, and that's where the guitar will begin to flourish and play a little bit more. And it's this cool back and forth, but it's not conversational. They're consistently overlapping on each other, but allowing space to be placed for a bit more density or movement from the other side. And it's just... Again, I swear I've used this word so often. It's just a beautiful song, though. It's really great to listen to. I'm loving every moment of this album, and it's just a good reminder that I need to listen to more of Jorge Drexler because, I mean, the dude can write. And the thing is, maybe it's just this album. I don't think I hear anything on here that is wildly innovative. There's some neat ideas across them, but for the most part, the songs tend to go where I want them to go. The emotions displayed at the beginning of songs are expanded upon in ways that I expect. And I think there's really only been one place in this song, and it was track 6's duet with Lenore, that my expectations weren't met. And maybe that's, now that I'm thinking about it, why that song hit me the way it did, because this album's given me what I've wanted at every twist and turn. It's consistently worn its emotion on its sleeve and says, this is what the song is about. And I say, okay, well, it should probably grow in this direction based off the instrumentation they have. And it tends to grow in that direction. There's very few unexpected ideas once we get into a song. And that presents a sound that feels very familiar to me. It's very beautiful. It's something I can relax and just melt into, and I really don't have to think too hard about it. But that doesn't mean that it's lacking in any sort of artistic credibility either. I'd say that there are still some really interesting choices in here. The rock section to this, that little romantic classical flourish in track, I don't even remember what that was. It was a couple tracks ago, I think. More recent than less recent, if I remember correctly. Somewhere between tracks 4 and 6, maybe. Little things like that, the call and response between the instruments, the melody writing in general, while comfortable, is still evocative. And I think that's where this type of writing really excels. It's not trying to break new ground, but it is distinctly Jorge Drexler. A little mix of a lot of inspirations that one person puts together into a very specific configuration full of ideas that aren't new in the area that they are from, but sound great and a little experimental in the combinations of sounds that he pairs them with. For instance, despite the Spanish influence in a lot of this music, I'm also finding that much of this sound also fits me in the way that something like smooth jazz would, using the sounds of jazz with less of the parts that people tend to dislike about jazz, like the soloing, for instance. This is why smooth jazz typically gets a lot of ire from big jazz fans, because it kind of is jazz for the masses. If you like the sounds of the brass and the swinging of eighth notes that you would get from the percussion section, the rhythm section, but you don't like those pesky solos and the meandering and all the, the musician-y stuff, you'd probably like smooth jazz. And that's kind of what I get from here, too. Not the disliking it. I like smooth jazz for a very different reason than I like traditional jazz. But it is something very comforting. It is something very fun to listen to, and I hear some of these ideas here, particularly with the percussion, the rhythm section, the drums, and the bass guitar. Some of the vamping on the acoustic and clean electric guitars in here too. I'd even say that the couple of times we've heard bells, the glockenspiel and the marimba, they have tend to had a little bit of a jazzy flair to them as well. And I'm kind of having this anchor point of jazz alongside the poppier ideas, alongside the Spanish ideas. And it gives me something that it's very quite familiar for me. And then they put these beautiful melodies and harmonies around that sort of rhythmic core. And so whether it's a ballad or a somber track or a bouncy dancy track, it has little pieces of all of this that come together into something that is very familiar to me on a lot of fronts, but as a collective whole is rather fresh for my ears. It's one of those things where on the surface it doesn't seem too groundbreaking, but there's actually a lot of really interesting combinations of things happening underneath. And I think that's where at least this album in particular is excelling. And I am a huge fan of this. I would love to see the live performance of this album. Yeah. As far as this song goes, like I said, it's kind of rockier. It has the bluesy element. It also feels kind of somber at times, but it's high energy. It's kind of, I don't know if joyous is the way I want to go, but it bounces between positive and negative flourishes. I'd say that generally it stays neutral, but it moves into happier vibes and then returns neutral and then hits maybe, a passing tone or a leading chord that has a bit more negativity, a little bit more somberness to it. And then it pulls back neutral. And I don't know if this feeling of mostly being neutral and dancing to either side is, once again, my understanding of emotion, which tends to be at the extents of this scale, or if that's actually what this song is supposed to be. Mildly feeling some positive and negative vibes while kind of being neutral throughout. Let me hit some lyrics and see what's going on there. I'm beginning to notice that these songs have less and less lyrics to them. There's still a lot of singing going on, but we're finding more instrumental solo sections, more instrumental atmospheric sections. We're finding more repetition of the lyrics. I mean, when we go back and look at track 2, was it? Oh no, track 3, The Passerby. We had 2 stanzas per verse. We had 2 verses. The chorus was rather lengthy, 6 lines to the chorus. I mean, there is a big chunk of lyrics in that track. And then we get to stuff like this song, and we have 16 lines, 8 of which are the chorus. So they're just the same 4 lines repeated both times we get to them. We only have 12 unique lines here. That's not a lot. 2 things happen there. Either what's stated is incredibly concise, says what needs to be said, and is out, or it's going to be incredibly vague. And I think it kind of dances between both worlds. It certainly is vague, but I think it says enough for me to understand it on some capacity too. It says, a few springs ago, the winds shift, and a song brought me here. It was just a subtle sign that everything grew, and a song brought me here. The second verse says, with a childlike wonder that remains, a song brought me here. I left many verses behind, line by line. A song brought me here. The general idea being that the song is a metaphor for events. Things happened. He met people, he was changed, he did things, and all of this brought him to a path in his life that has led to this moment. He's had to leave some things behind. He says he left many verses behind. That could be possibilities. It could represent people or relationships that he's had to sever from his life in order to get to where he is. But he hasn't completely built up to get here. There's been building of things. There's been losing of things. But he is here now because his life, all of the choices that have been made, is his song, and it has taken him here. It's kind of like, well, yeah, but it does mean something when we get to the chorus. I do like the idea, though, in general, of using musical terms as metaphor. It's something we see a lot in music, though I would like to see it more often. And when it does pop up, I like to give a little nod to it because I think it's pretty neat. If the life is the song, then verses would be portions of the life. And I think that's a very cool way to look at it. The chorus states, before, in another distant world, in times of another song, far with my sight upon other mirrors, without even noticing, I started to travel. And what I like about this is that he basically sees other paths, other ideas, other places, and he says, I like that better. I want to be there. With my sight upon other mirrors, I started to travel. I really like that. Basically not happy with where he is now. What he calls here is another song. If, like I mentioned earlier, the song is a metaphor for his life, this would be a way of saying a lifetime ago, or in another life, I was this person. That's a very common phrase in English, a way of saying that you have changed as a person. Maybe your actions have changed. Could be something as simple as I was directionless in my youth and now I have goals, or it could be something even larger. Maybe you have a criminal past that you've escaped, or alcoholism that ruined your life at one point. You're a different person now. You're exploring life through a different song. It's a song that doesn't really say much. It says I'm in a different place now than I was, but it does it through the metaphor of musical terminology. And I really like that. I think that's a cool way to go about doing this. We only have 5 tracks left, I think. And like I said earlier, we got one more longish one on track 9, which is after the one we're about to listen to. And then it's just going to be fast. I don't know why. This album's just, it's quick. All right, let's dive into this. Track 8. Oh, this is very cool. I want to touch on this real quick. Aquiles por su talón es Aquiles. Translates to Achilles. Due to his heel is Achilles. And I really like that idea of being defined by your myth, of being seen through a lens of the future. I don't know if that's particularly how it's going to go down, but that's a wild way to look at things when you are no longer who you are, but who people perceive you to be. I mean, I could easily see this in some sort of American animation comedy show. Take your pick, Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, whatever. And, you know, they do a little skit and Achilles is there and an arrow hits his heel and some guy runs up. He's like, your Achilles heel is your heel and your Achilles? No way, dude. Some sort of anachronistic joke like that. And that's sort of how I see this, being defined by the myth that comes after what you do. It's impossibly cyclical. How would you go about life living up to something like that? So I don't know if that's particularly what the song's going to explore, but that's what I get out of the title without even looking at the lyrics or listening to the music yet. But I do like the title. It's evocative. It makes me think of stuff. Let's dive into this. This wavery guitar has shown up a couple of times on this album. I always note it. We have some sort of shaker instrument off on the left. We have the cross stick on the snare center. A lot of muted percussion. Nice syncopation to it. See what I mean about like a jazzy vibe though? I don't know that I would call this jazz ever, but it feels like it. More of those horn swells.
Y en lo más sutil de los cuerpos sutiles, lejos de la noria de causas y efectos, se tiene el corazón que se trae por defecto.
Very wide vocal approach here too.
Así como Aquiles, por su talón es Aquiles.
Okay, I thought they were going to go to a psychedelic rock angle. They tricked me.
La cruz de un presentimiento que nos suelta hacia los cuatro vientos con el mandamiento de buscar a oscuras.
So I heard a little bit of uncertainty at the beginning of this. And then into... Okay, that's a different line. It was uncertainty into positivity, acceptance, joy.
Lejos de la noria de causas y efectos. Se tiene el corazón que se trae por defecto.
Dang, this song's almost over.
Así como Aquiles, por su talón es Aquiles. Es lo que es.
See, another song that just ends. it makes the last track so interesting having, a finale written for it. One thing I like about this is the wavy guitar. It has sort of a loungy vibe to it, and I think it works well within this light, ballady jazz feel that they have going on through most of this track. But what I thought was really great was realizing, hey, another style of music that uses this wavy guitar is psychedelic music. And they have these little lean ins into this psychedelic rock like bombast. And they never really fully commit to it. They hit it and then allow the song to simmer out. But it is an interesting little overlap. And it's one of those things that I like about Jorge Drexler is, he's got all these different influences, right? We've heard so many different styles across this album, and he just has a knack for saying, okay, so these two styles, they have these common elements in the Venn diagram. And if I want to sneak this one in, there's a little common element that hits the middle of this Venn diagram too. If I put all three of these together, I really need to focus on this one aspect, maybe a compositional technique, maybe an instrument or a timbre, and allowing it to tie everything together. I think it's what makes these songs feel not as disparate as they could. And he has a knack for it. And I'm kind of jealous of it. I mean, I'm pretty good at analyzing, core elements of genres and sounds. Maybe I just need to apply that to my music making too, because usually I come at it from like, what do I want to make instead of like, what genre do I want to make? I come at it from more of an artistic perspective. What's the story I want to tell? But I really like this idea. And I'm kind of curious which way Jorge comes at it too. Is it from a thematic perspective first or a compositional side? Because, like I said, I am finding that most of these songs, all of their overlapping elements, there's usually one key part to it that gets focused on, that helps tie all of the different genres and styles together. And on this one, I do think it was that wavy guitar. It's what makes everything kind of work here, and what makes that build up into that rock style post-chorus work. Honestly, it shouldn't. You shouldn't be able to get from lounge to that, but he makes it sound effortless and seamless, and I really appreciate that. But that buildup is the other part of this that I think stands out. Most of this song is light. I talked about the light bass work. I talked about the light percussion using the shaker and the cross stick on the snare rather than the snare head and maybe a hi-hat or a cymbal, something a bit louder. Actually, I think there was a hi-hat paired with the shaker, but whatever. We're going to stick with the idea though. It's still lighter, smaller percussion instruments. And we keep the energy down low for a lot of this. It has a nice rhythm to it, a little bit of syncopation, gives it some groove. I don't think we've had a single song with rigid rhythmic elements. Everything's been syncopated on this, which makes sense because a lot of Spanish music tends to be heavily syncopated. Jazz tends to have a lot of syncopation to it as well. So since those two are what I hear as the strongest influences on this album, it makes sense for it to be a rhythmically interesting one. We have his vocals come in on top of that. It's very light, sultry, smoky, smooth, sultry. I said that one already. Loungy. That's the one I wanted to go for. And then it builds. We get some brass in there once again with the swells. Swell into it. Nice fade out. I'm telling you, dude loves to put horn swells in his music. I also hear it on the vocals too, because as I'm replicating it fairly well, the voice is another instrument that does volume rising, smooth volume rising very easily. And so we've heard the vocals in the background do it as well. The dude loves that sound. I'm kind of curious why. Maybe it's a popular sound in Uruguay folk music. I don't know, but it's here a lot. And it always sounds great. It's just every time the horns come in, they're either going to do a cool syncopated lick if it's a harder, heavier hitting song with a bit more physicality, or if it's more of a smoother emotional track, you're gonna get those swells. And it's like the horns have two jobs that Jorge has in mind, and it's one of those two. And I find that kind of interesting when you find, I don't know if you could call it a tell of the artist, but definitely like like almost like a compositional pigeonholing where they see these instruments and they're like, all right, you guys, I got a job for you. It's going to be the same job every song. I really like it when you guys do this. And like, dude, I'm not going to say I don't. Even if you don't think you do, you're probably just blind to it. Someone's going to pick up patterns. We all fall into them in all of our artistic endeavors, regardless of what they are. So, I mean, we're humans. Humans love patterns, man. So I find it really interesting that that's one of his, though. But we build out of this smoothness into this big psychedelic rock bombast. The drums open up. We have snare. We're hitting the drum heads now. We have some bells that pop in. The guitars are coming in with heavier strumming. And then it all fades out. And that's the song. You go from loungy, you build to this big moment, drop it back down, loungy, build to the big moment, drop it back down, and end. That's it. Not a strong finality to this one like the last track. There's a little bit of, like I mentioned, a little bit of, I don't know, feeling out of it. A little, not feeling it might be what it is. Feeling out of place. And then a little bit of complacency is kind of what I get. And maybe an understanding of things, an acceptance might be a word. Complacency tends to have a negative connotation to it, where acceptance is positive, even though they're both finding a way to come to terms with the way things are, the status quo. They mean the same thing generally, but they come from different places, I guess. I'm curious if we're going to hear any of that in the lyrics. I have no idea what the buildup is supposed to represent, though. I kind of hope the lyrics lean into something there, particularly in the chorus, that I can pull some sort of thematic read from. Lyrically, this doesn't really explore the idea of contending with your myth, but it is about finding who you are. Maybe even versus who you want to be, who you wish you were. Coming to terms with what reality is. Says you are who you are, whom you've always been. You feel whatever you feel in the center of the silent center, whether it makes sense or not. And hardly ever you are who you want to be. You cry what you have to cry. You don't choose whom you fall for or what things might hurt you. Basically saying that there's a lot of things in your life that you don't get to have a say in. There's a lot of parts of yourself, your decisions that you make, the ways that you feel, your relationship to your emotions and how they showcase themselves, what kind of people you gravitate towards, what type of activities you gravitate towards. Some things feel like they just happen. The chorus kicks in here. In the subtlest of subtle bodies, far from the wheel of cause and effect, your heart is the one you are born with by default. And just like Aquiles, due to his heel, he is Achilles. Basically saying that you are who you are. Part of it is going to be external, things that you don't have control over. Complete, sense of self through nature. Just who you were born to be. Some of it may be nurture. You might have control over that, but regardless, you are this person. The second verse talks about trying to contend with this. He says that thirst, that water won't quench, the cross to bear from wandering, being thrown in every direction and having to search in the dark. It's the mix of trying to force yourself to be who you want to be and also trying to figure out who you are, if not that. wrapping this up, bringing it back to the chorus, you are who you are. Yeah. That's a cool little track there. Next up, we have a song with an English title. I Don't Worry About a Thing. I can pronounce that one real good, and I understand it. Let's kick this off, see what's going on with track 9. We have a guest marimba player on this, Leo Sidran, and a guest vocalist and Hammond organ player, Ben Sidran.
If life is driving you to drink, you're sitting there just wondering what you should think. I got some consolation for you. I'll give it to you if I might. I don't worry about a thing, 'cause nothing's gonna be alright. Nothing's gonna be alright.
I love that little horn
just
thing.
One big trouble spot, because some have plenty and some have not. Always somebody playing
The
with
marimba sounds
dynamite.
great in the back of this, forming that soft sound off to the
Don't
left.
worry about a thing, 'cause nothing's gonna be alright.
Yeah, dude, this is just a very chill song. I think it's the syncopated guitar work over here. I mean, the bells are gonna give it this vibe too. But there's also something in the chord progression and the melody too. The organ leaning into it. It's beach vibes. Oh, the organ coming in after the sax with a very similar little lick, almost continuing the idea. Oh, there's a little bit of the chorus melody in there too. A little variation on that motif.
Don't waste your time trying to be a go-getter. Things will get worse before they get any better.
I used to be troubled,
I know you were.
but I finally found the light.
See this conversational vocal work. This is what I wanted out of the Lenore feature.
Nothing's gonna be alright.
No, nothing's gonna be alright. I don't worry about a thing. 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 I don't worry about a thing, 'cause nothing's gonna be alright. Oh no,
That's right.
I don't worry about a thing, 'cause nothing's gonna be alright. I don't worry about a thing, 'cause nothing's gonna be alright.
What a fun little ending. Another one that's very short and abrupt, just kind of comes in and does its thing. Not a strong sense of finality, but I mean, it's a nice punctuation at the end of this phrase. That certainly works. Yeah, this is just nice, chill, laid back. The organ, that tone, it just holding these chords out, being this drone in the background for whatever reason, that absolutely gives me this sense of laid back. And I think more importantly, a lot of this song just gives me beach vibes. I could easily see this being played in like a stereotypical beach scene in a film on some radio. So we get some diegetic music in the scene while somebody's like on one of those beach chairs, laying there catching some rays. Like it just fits that feeling. It's the organ. It's just playing chords. It's just holding them out, drone in the background. Absolutely fits it. It's the lightness of everything. Bum, got, da 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 da. It's just very. It's fun. It's lighthearted. It's upbeat, but it's not super dancey. It has that groove to it, but to me, it feels more laid back. It's a relaxing type of upbeat feeling. And then we have the chord progressions, we have the melodies, we have the very colloquial back and forth between the vocalists, where one will say something and another will sing something, and then we'll have a haha, oh no, and then continue singing. Feels very colloquial between the two of them. Less like a song and more like a conversation, which, like I said, this is what I was expecting from the Lenore feature. And I find it wild that Lenore was literally featured in the title of the song and is a second artist on that track in Spotify, but this has nothing about it. The only reason I knew we were going to have these featured musicians is because of the person who requested this album and some of the extra context that was written for it. But as far as Spotify goes, I mean, are they just part of the band and they got a little bit more spotlight this time around? I don't know. But I find it wild that the featured vocalist, I think, gets less of a diverse vocal track than when we have a second vocalist who isn't featured in a sense, at least not in the title or anything like that. So yeah, I wish we would see more of this. I think it suits Jorge to get playful with the vocals on some of these tracks. And while, like I said, I really liked the layered vocals on track 6's Toque, queda, it would have been cool to have some back and forth on that, just to get some extra use out of having another vocalist. And obviously, Jorge's showing he has the chops for this type of writing on this track. So, I don't know, man. The guitar vamping, the marimba, dude, the marimba 100%, along with the organ, that's beach vibes right there. I don't even really care what they're playing as long as they get the right chords, laid back, carefree, little happiness. As long as you get that, those two timbres alone are going to sell the atmosphere. And they absolutely work here in that regard. I want to talk about the solo section because this was really cool. We had 3 instruments back to back give us these solos. We had the marimba, we had the sax, and we had the organ. And what was very cool, what I really liked about it was that they all felt like they were part of a conversation, just like the 2 vocalists are. As we moved from the marimba into, no, a sax, which one came first? I think the marimba did. As we moved into the marimba to the sax, there was a continuation of that idea. What was being played here was kind of passed on to the second instrument. And as we moved out of the sax into the organ, the sax ended it with this lick. This little like 5-note thing, a little bit of a rhythmic part to it, a little bit of movement pitch-wise, and the organ plays like 90% that same exact thing. It feels like all of these instruments are in conversation with each other. They are simply passing the baton of who's talking about this topic next. What I really liked too is that I picked it up during the organ solo, but not the other 2. So I don't know if it wasn't there or if I just wasn't paying enough attention at that point, but the organ plays something that's very similar to the chorus melody line that the vocals sing. I don't know if it is an exact one-to-one copy. I don't think it is, but it is definitely some sort of variation on that motif. And I always love this. This is one of my favorite things to hear in a jazz soloist, is for them to take and modify and use a part of the A section of the song in their solo to create a solo that isn't just theirs, but is a part of this song. It's a part of this performance. I've talked about this in the past. I certainly think that just kind of playing whatever you want to play during that performance is fine. But if you're just going to play something on top of, a few chords, when it comes to jazz, there's a lot of chord progressions, but there's also a lot of commonly used chord progressions. And if your solo doesn't incorporate anything from the main A section, your solo could fit in anything. I really like it when a soloist tries to work some of the main motif into their thing to kind of say, okay, what I'm saying is part of the larger conversation. It isn't just we had to get through that A part so I can do my solo, so I can show off a little bit, so I can express myself. Sometimes that's fine. Some solos are just extraordinary. I don't care if they're connected to the A or not. But to me, it always adds a little bit to it. It has an understanding of the context of the performance and incorporates a bit into it. And that's exactly what happens here. The organ brings in a bit and says, look, we're doing this song. I understand we're doing this song. Let's bring a little bit in. Let's connect this to the chorus, especially as the organ is the last solo instrument in this group. After this, we're heading back into the chorus. We're going to go into this idea. So connecting this bridge into a repetition of the chorus musically is phenomenal. I absolutely love that. And it is a great way to bring us out of this back into this repetition of this chorus to bring back, the main thematic message here, I suppose. This is in English. I did pick up this chorus. We heard this sentence like 7 times or something. I don't worry because nothing's going to be fine. Something along those lines. And it's just a very cool way to wrap up that solo section and bring us back to the core bit. And I'm a huge fan of that. Is there anything else I wanted to bring up on this one? I will say, though, the jazziness seems to be becoming more prominent. Maybe I'm just noticing it more in these last few tracks. But yeah, dude, I brought it up. And ever since then, maybe it's just because, I said it and it's mentally on my mind now. I'm feeling a lot of jazziness in these tracks. And I'm really digging it. The solos are great. I love that inclusion. It adds a little bit to the tracks. I thought the first couple of songs were great. Don't get me wrong, loved them. But they were very vocal focused and atmosphere. And that was fine. But as we get further into this, and we have more instrumental parts, more instrumental solos, it's gorgeous. I love it. Now, being that these last few tracks are 3.5, 3 and 2.5 minutes, I'm thinking we're going to have less of these as the vocals tend to take up about 2.5 to 3 minutes of the songs here. We'll see how that goes. Let's dive into some lyrics for this one, though I think I got the gist of it already. And then we'll proceed into our final trio of tracks. Yeah, that chorus line, I don't worry about a thing because nothing's going to be all right. That captures the general mood of this song. The opening verse. If life is driving you to drink, you're sitting there wondering what you should think. I'll give you some consolation. I don't worry about a thing because nothing's going to be all right. So if you're so stressed out that life causes you to drink, let me just tell you this, man. It ain't going to get any better. And that kind of cracks me up. That's the advice of this track. Verse 2, the world's just one big trouble spot because some have plenty and some have not. Always somebody playing with dynamite. Verse 3, don't waste your time trying to be a go-getter. Things will get worse before they get better. It says, I used to be troubled, but I finally found the light. Now I don't care about anything. That's good, right? I get the song. As far as themes, messages go, I kind of get the idea that it is supposed to be like, just live in the moment, right? Tomorrow is going to be bad. Tomorrow's going to be worse. The month after that's going to be worse. Terrible things are on the horizon. But today isn't tomorrow yet. So just be today. It fits a lot of the feeling of being present in the here and now that this album's going for, and trying to make the best of the now in case the future doesn't come. Being uncertain about the future, being uncertain of who you are. There's a lot of things in here about being overwhelmed with the past, being overwhelmed with the future, and trying to just stay present and making today better than yesterday, and hoping tomorrow is better than today. But despite that cursory read on this track, it comes off as nihilistic in a way. Kind of has that teen energy of everything's bad, but instead of trying to fix things, trying to make things better, it's, well, why should I try then? It says, don't waste your time being a go-getter. But it follows it up with, things will get worse before they get better. But in order for things to get better, people have to be go-getters. You have to put the hard work in today for tomorrow to improve. And like, I get what it's going for. I feel like it just misses the mark for me, though. But it does catch the vibe of someone laid back and chill who just doesn't care and is trying to live their best now. And I think the song does a great job of that. So like, on an artistic side, wonderful. Still solid music. Have no complaints about it. But then the message, man. It's weird too, because I think Jorge lyrically is typically very attuned with himself. I think he does a great job at vocalizing a lot of optimism. That things have been bad, things could be bad, but tomorrow will be better. And so we have a song like this that just says tomorrow's going to be bad, so don't worry about it. I don't know, it feels a little out of character for him. The next track is Noctiluca, which my translation says Noctiluca. So I don't know if that's like a hyphenated, not a hyphenated, but like maybe like a slang word, a colloquial word that doesn't necessarily have an English translation. Maybe it's a made up word that Jorge made. I don't know. But it doesn't translate to anything. I get night out of it, sort of nocturnal. But other than that, I don't know. So let's dive into it, see what's going on with this track. Is that two guitars, or are we getting overtones, the quieter, higher pitch stuff?
La noche estaba cerrada y las heridas abiertas. Y yo que iba a ser tu padre buscaba sin encontrarme en una playa desierta. Tenía la edad aquella en que la certeza caduca. De pronto al mirar el mar vi que el mar brillaba con un millar de noctilucas. Algo de aquel asombro debió anunciarme que llegaría.
This is more minimal than anything we've heard recently, but I'd say even more minimal than some of the earlier stuff. Guitar, vocals, that's it.
Supe sin entenderlo de tu alegría.
There's an element of awe, wonder in the vocal melody though. The twinkling is nice.
En el mar oscuro donde la se acurruca. La noche estaba cerrada y las heridas abiertas. Y yo que iba a ser tu padre buscaba sin encontrarme en una playa desierta. Tenía la edad aquella en que la certeza caduca. Y de pronto al mirar el mar vi que el mar brillaba con un millar de Noctilucas. Algo de aquel asombro.
It keeps feeling like it's going to build into something, but it doesn't.
Pues yo desde mis escombros, al igual que el mar, sentí que fosforecía. Supe sin entenderlo de tu alegría anticipada. Un día entenderás que habla de ti esta canción encandilada. Brilla Noctiluca, un punto en el mar oscuro donde la luz se acurruca.
Reverb and echo of some sort, twinkling. Is that why can't I think of that name? I'll get it in a second. Hopefully. If not, I'll look it up when I break for lyrics. I come back and be like, yeah, I remembered it. Nah. I try not to take credit for when I have to look things up. Okay, so this was a neat song. It brings the energy down. We've had a lot of high energy, rockier, jazzier tracks so far. And this kind of brings us back to some of the more somber, less bombastic stuff that we had at the beginning of the track. I don't know if this is to ramp us up, to give us a low point to contrast with a big bombastic ending, or if we're bringing the energy down to wrap the album up. After all, there is only 5 minutes left in the album, so it's not like we're necessarily needing a peak. And if I Don't Worry About a Thing and Aquiles were the peaks to this album, I'm honestly fine with that. Regardless, Noctiluca, this is low energy. We have just the guitar, maybe 2 guitars. There's some overtones in there. Might be a second guitar. Might just be some cool things going on with the single guitar. And then we have the vocals. And this is it for the entirety of the song. There is an element of spaciousness in here, but when we listen to the vocal melody, I hear a lot of awe and wonder. He'll kind of have this neutrality to his melody line, and then he'll scoop up into a couple of notes that just have this burst of energy to them compared to the chordal stuff that's going on. And it's just this joy, this wondrous joy that comes through for like 3 notes, and then he'll bring it back down into that neutral singing style, the neutral choice, note choice. And it's just, it feels so wonderful, but in measures, as if the awe is something that, you know, whatever is making him feel this level of awe it's isolated. You get a little bit of it here and then it's gone, and it comes up later and it's gone. And that's pretty much everything on the surface of this track. There's one more thing I want to bring up though, and it's everything that sits around it. There's so many little things here. I think somebody is on some sort of metal bells, a glockenspiel, and it's not a lot. It's like you hit 1 note, maybe hit 2 notes real quick, and just allow it to ring out. You don't play melodies on it. You don't keep the sound up forever. You just kind of hit it and allow it to reverberate. And maybe 20, 30 seconds later, you'll do another little sound. It's a little twinkling. I think we had some bouncing back and forth at one point where you heard one sound over here and it reverberated and dissipated. Then you heard a sound over here. There was some sort of metallic clacking as well. It sounded like a bundle of, I don't know what they're called. It's like drumsticks, but instead of one solid stick, it's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 smaller, thinner wood sticks that you kind of have together in a bundle. And it's less of a direct hit because there's movement to them, because there's space. And there's not a lot of space because they're bound together, but there is movement to it. They can bend a little bit. Drumsticks can. It's just solid wood, you know. And so they do absorb some of the impact of the strike too. So not only do they not have a defined tip like the top of a drumstick, but they also have movement. They're going to absorb some of the energy of the impact. And it just creates this very light sound that still has some of the timbre and texture elements that you expect from a wooden drumstick. It's not like you're using steel brushes or something for that lighter sound. That's going to come with its own timbre and textures. And it sounds like we're hitting maybe the sides, the rims of the drums themselves. Wood on metal is kind of what I'm getting there. Maybe some, I don't know, some cymbals being hit here, but it's all very, very light, very down low. It ends up feeling like twinkling. All of this lightly metallic shimmeriness kind of popping up all over the place in the mix. Very quiet compared to everything else, which is already quiet. And, you know, it's called Noctiluca. I already had nighttime in my mind. The lack of instrumentation kind of feels like night. And I think I even called the metallic hits like twinkling. And so it feels like staring at the night sky and just seeing lights. It's the stars. Some, you know, grow a little bit brighter than the others. And you kind of see this movement in a sense of, you know, different stars shimmering at different brightnesses. That's what the song feels like to me. Laying on your back in a field and just looking up at the stars and the awe of it. The vastness of space. That's what I get out of that track. And as usual, very well done. Thematically appropriate. Well, thematically strong. We haven't hit the lyrics yet. I don't know if it's appropriate or not. Some of the songs I have found a bit of a disconnect between the lyrical themes and musical ones, but I will say that the music has consistently given me a strong thematic resonance. There's very rarely like an instrument that I'm like, hey, what's that doing in there? It's just like doing this other thing entirely. Like, no, everything works together really well to tell the story. So let's see what the lyrical story is for Noctiluca. All right, a couple of things I had to look up. The instrument's called a ratchet. I always remember that it's a tool. And it just, ratchet always escapes my mind. It's just not the word I think of for that instrument. I found out there's a name for the bundle of drumsticks. They call it multi-rods. That's something that it's so obvious that of course I'm going to forget it in the future. And Noctiluca, I decided to go look up because of the lyrics. The chorus states, "Sparkle, Noctiluca, a spot in the dark ocean where light snuggles." I was like, okay, what is this? Is this a real thing? It is. It's a genus of marine dinoflagellate. They are bacteria. Is that what it is? I don't know. They are something small. You need a microscope to view them. They are commonly found in bioluminescent organisms. And if you've never seen bioluminescence, it is phenomenal. It really is awesome. The original use of that word and that feeling of awe and wonder in the song. Yeah, I feel that every time I see. We have bioluminescence down here in Florida, where you just go out to the water and the algae, some of the fish, and maybe it's just the bacteria in it. I don't know. But if you move your finger along the water, it lights up blue. The movement causes this, whatever it is, to light up. And when fish move through it, of course, it lights up too. And it just looks phenomenal. If you were to like put some water on your fingers and like splash it down, every piece that the raindrop hits, it kind of dances, it sparkles. It's really difficult to explain. I'm sure there's thousands of videos on YouTube for bioluminescence, marine bioluminescence in particular here, because this song is about seeing it in the ocean too. So it is marine bioluminescence. Go watch them, dude. They are, and if you get a chance, if you can like find a place where these organisms grow in your area, go see it in person. It is very cool. So that's what Noctiluca is, though. This is about marine bioluminescence. And the song says that he was roaming around the beach in pitch black. And he was about to be a dad. And he was searching for himself, trying to figure out who he was. How's he going to do this? Fatherhood is kind of a scary thing, especially if you're unsure of yourself, which, I mean, we just came off 2 tracks ago, Aquiles, right? Who are you? Who are you trying to be? Are you fighting with all of that? I think it's really interesting that trying to find yourself and have that self-confidence was only 2 tracks ago, and here we are, somebody searching for themselves. He says he's old enough to lose his sense of certainty, but then suddenly saw the sea light up with thousands of Noctiluca. Something about that wonder should have told me you were arriving, since I felt from the debris that, like the sea, something in me sparkled, and I knew without knowing about the joy you'll bring, and one day you'll understand this shining tune is about you. So he not only says that the sparkling in the water gave him a spark and kind of showed him some of the joy in life that he might have forgotten, being, past that point age-wise and experience with the world, that he was starting to, lose some of that luster. And he sees this and he's like, yeah, that's the sign I needed. Things are going to be good here. And so he also attributes the Noctiluca to his kid. The chorus says, "Sparkle, Noctiluca, a spot in the dark ocean where light snuggles." He is directly talking about to these organisms in the water, but also to his child, telling them to sparkle even in the darkest moments of their life. The second half of the song is the same lyrics all over again. This is after the solo section, so we just repeat all of this once again. Beautiful song, though. About fatherhood, but also a message for his child. Even in the darkest of times, life, the world will show you brightness, especially if you are that brightness. Keep it within and be the light onto the world. Wonderful. We have 2 left. We're going to check out Todos a sus puestos, which translates to everyone to their positions. Let's dive in. Oh, this is good. This also has slight... Not anymore. It kind of had beach vibes with all of the instruments, but I do like this percussion over here, though. Lo que duran los suspiros, lo que una mariposa
dura fuera del retiro. Y
There it
aunque no
is.
haya una razón, todos a sus puestos. La vida
If anyone
puede
has
que no
any insight into
se
the
ponga
percussion
mucho
instruments on the right, let me know.
esto. Por una vez que no
I
duele,
can't place that sound at all.
todo el mundo a bordo, que la pena cante hoy.
There's some cool, like, wooden hollows percussion on this side, too.
Claro que también melancolía.
I kind of want to say these are bongos, but it's
Con su
slightly
pluma
off.
minuciosa,
I don't know, something about it doesn't sound like a bongo.
lo que uno anda. Dejemos que esa nostalgia nos bese la cara.
Interesting little bits of
seca,
darkness in the guitar.
como el sol de los domingos besa la plaza de Chueca. Y aunque no haya una razón, todos
Is that
a
a-
sus puestos, la vida puede que no se ponga mucho.
What instrument is that lower in the center?
Por una vez que no duele, todo el mundo a bordo.
I want to say it's a clarinet,
Que
but I
la
don't
pena
think we've heard any
cante
clarinets so far.
en oídos sordos. Oh, oh, que la pena cante hoy en oídos sordos.
Those swells again. Ooh, that warm uptick. So actually hearing the drums a bit more isolated there in those final 5 seconds, I actually think that is the multi-drums, the multi-sticks. What did I call them? I told you, it's such a generic name, I was going to forget it. It didn't even take me 5 minutes. Oh, man. But yeah, multi-rod, that's what it was. I think that's what that was. I still don't know about the stuff over here. Like I said, reminded me of bongos, but the timbre was a little off, darker than I expect from bongos. So, I don't know. Definitely, well, probably something in the hand drum area family of instruments. If you have any insight into any of that, though, let me know. Like, if you heard that and you're like, oh, yeah, I know that instrument. Because, you know, there's another thing to this, is that from the jazzier side of things, I can pick out most of the instruments pretty easily, but from the Uruguayan area, I don't know. Maybe there's some instruments from the region that have a very specific timbre, very important to that culture's music, and I just haven't been exposed to it. So there's that possibility as well. I'm always open to learn about more instruments and more cultures, music in general. Because I have a lot of blind spots, honestly. You know, I grew up on a very Western diet of rock, metal, and rock, classical, and jazz. So I definitely have a bit more of a narrow view on music and instrumentation. This is kind of a somber track, though. I think that's interesting. Here's the thing, though, okay? When we had just the instruments at the end, like, 2:15 into the track, we had what I think was clarinet-led outro. I got a very melancholic feeling to it. Kind of somber, and that's why the uplift in those final 5 seconds was so impactful. It brought a bit of positivity, of hope, maybe, to the song. But I'll tell you, when Jorge's singing, it feels like a love song. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you. It's, my guess right here is that some of the note relationships against the chords being played represent different chords. But when he's singing, I'm like, dude, this is a gorgeous love song. And when he quits singing, I'm like, dude, I'm going to cry. This is so depressing. And it's interesting because the music doesn't change at all. So I'm wondering if maybe this isn't something along those lines, bittersweet in the lyrics or something like that. It is quieter generally. We have a solo instrument that we haven't heard elsewhere, which I think is the clarinet. It is. The thing is, assuming this is live, well, not assuming, I was told that this is a live recording. They have a lot of instruments in this album that don't show up all the time. So how many instruments do they have just sitting around on stands, or in the case of like the marimba, off stage to be wheeled in, that they can perform all of this? I mean, I don't know how big the stage was, but 24 instruments, I think, so far on this. And I'm kind of curious how many musicians we had too. I don't think I've heard more than like 6 or 7 layers in a song at max. So you could probably get away with like 7 or 8 musicians, but you also have to have, people who can play all of these instruments. So it might be more feasible to have 15 musicians, and some of them just don't play on every song. They're just waiting until the next time their instrument shows up. Something a bit more common for classical music than pop music. But I do like the clarinet. It's a different timbre. I think it works well here. It's very warm, resonant, a bit on the lower side. We do get to hear a little bit of its higher octaves, but a lot of it feels to be in a more comfortable lower range. That matches the overall vibe of this. Once Jorge stops singing, like I said, this feeling kind of drops, hits something a bit more somber. And I think that instrument absolutely leans into that. It's darker, it's warmer, it's woodier. It has that resonance to it, and lower pitch for a lot of this too. So, yeah, very cool song. And like I mentioned, we're still kind of on a downward slope. And with only 2.5 minutes left in the album, I'm kind of hoping they stay on this lower energy to wrap it up. Like I said, if Aquiles and Don't Worry About a Thing are the emotional and not emotional, but energy peaks for this album, I think that works beautifully, and just kind of bring the energy down to where we started the album to wrap it up. And it kind of gives it a nice like bell curve. We explore some more intense, wild ideas in the middle, but the beginnings and ends are both a bit more mellow. Cool way to phrase out the album. Let me hit some lyrics. It is called Everyone to Their Positions. This is a very, I don't want to say laid back, but it is a bit on the chiller side, especially after some of the tracks are heard in the middle for a title like that. Everyone to Their Positions, to me, indicates some sort of alarm or emergency. And the song's like, doo 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 doo, just lots of long held out notes, kind of dreary and lower tempo. Let me hit those lyrics. I'm kind of curious about this track. The chorus says, no matter what, everyone to their positions. Life probably won't get much better than this. Echoing ideas that we heard on I Don't Worry About a Thing. Says, now that it doesn't hurt, everyone on board, let the sorrow sing on deaf ears. So is this about ignoring the pain or about adjusting to it? It says life won't get better than this, and now that it doesn't hurt, everyone on board, let the sorrow sing on deaf ears. So let the negative times be unheard, don't give it the attention that it wants. In a sense, I don't. It seems to line up with I don't worry about a thing in a lot of ways. Saying things are just going to be worse and that for right now, don't worry about it. Don't give it any attention. Have fun. Let the sorrow sing on deaf ears. Don't listen to the negativity. The first verse says, "It's very clear to me, strange days are aplenty while good days are rare. The ephemeral rose lasted just a sigh, as much as as much as a butterfly outside of its cocoon." Basically saying when you have a good day, enjoy it, because most days aren't. And yeah, I think that's, I mean, he says strange days are plenty as if strange days aren't also good days. Strange days are wild. Better than a bad day, I'd say. The second verse says, "I know that melancholy demands, with her thorough quill it eagerly undoes everything we do." Yeah, that is a wild line. That no matter how much we do to ensure our own happiness, melancholy can undo all of it. In fact, it demands that it undoes all of it. Maybe it's not necessarily, oh, yeah. Okay, hypothesis time. Jorge's idea of a bad day is very different from mine. Jorge's idea of a bad future or a negative future is very different from mine. That could lead to the schism between my idea of ignoring the future and his idea of ignoring the future. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. When did this come out? 2010. Well, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the future he saw was just a bunch of dreary days and not the utmost apocalypse that the future seems to be driving towards. One of those I can see is just kind of, let the bad days roll off your back and enjoy the good ones. I totally line up with that. I'm not somebody to stress out too much about, I had too much traffic today and I almost got into an accident and I was late to the doctors and yeah, dude, those kind of days, they suck. But you just got to let them roll. If you let them rile you up, they're controlling you. They're lasting longer than they were. But I think that's just like a bad day. But the future is only going to get worse means something very different to me. I have seen the future get really bad. So it's not, to me, it's not one of those things you can ignore. But maybe, like I said, we're just on two different wavelengths here about what a bad future is. Because his idea seems to be a bad day. It seems to be melancholy and not existential dread. And like I said, I think we just have two different ideas of what a bad future is. So this song, though, basically says when things are bad, let them go. Focus on the positive. All right, let that sorrow sing on deaf ears. He says, "I know melancholy demands, it will eagerly undo everything." Yeah, 100%. You can build up so much in your life. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm getting back to this. And one spiral, one big bad day. And so much of this album is about relationships. So let's take it there. Say you end a 10-year relationship with someone. That undoes a lot. That undoes not only just the present, but the future plans that you had with this person. It says, "But let the nostalgia kiss your dry faces like Sunday's sun kisses Chuka Square." So remember the good times, allow that to dry your eyes, and proceed on with the future. I had to look up Chuka Square. I figured it was some shopping area, but I wanted to double check. It is. It's a pretty big shopping area in Madrid. They have museums. I'm seeing pictures of some delicious food. It is 6:30 my time. I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm getting a little hungry myself. One song left, and then I get to go eat some dinner. But I'm seeing these pictures, and I'm like, dude, I should order out some pizza. Cause yeah, dude, I want to go here. I want to go to Chuka Square. The food looks great. The museums look interesting. There's some good coffee shops. There's some libraries. I mean, this is a big market square. Looks cool. I'd like to go one day. And he says, let nostalgia kiss your dry face like the Sunday sun kisses Chuka Square. And then we repeat the chorus. Life won't get better. Let the pain subside and then live your best life. Good message, for the most part. All right, last track of the album. The shortest of the album, too, at just 2.5 minutes, 150 seconds. That is a very short track. This one's called Talón, which translates to curtains. Let's dive in. I gotta update my font so that I can get accent notations above letters. Because that O is supposed to have a little tick mark above it, and it doesn't. I love all the guitar sounds. The production on this is very different.
Dejé el disfraz en un rincón. Se acabó la función. Mi corazón.
And some clipping over on the left.
Mientras tanto en algún otro lugar, dos hilos cruzan juntos otro telar.
Wait, is that it? It just dawned on me. Earlier on, when I was reading some of the context for this album, they had mentioned that the crowd doesn't show up in the album much at all, but there are 2 songs that they contribute to the recording. Are those the parts where it sounds like there's, group vocals where we have Jorge front and center, then off on the side? It's not just one voice on either side, it's a group. I didn't even think about it. I just figured that they were group vocals. The whole band was singing at those points, but was it the audience? I think that only showed up in 2 songs, and I just completely slipped my mind. And when they were clapping there at the end, I was like, oh yeah, dude, this is live. Like, I've said that a couple of times, but it never really clicked because you don't hear the crowd at all. So, it's not like listening to a live album where the crowd's clapping and cheering and whistling all the time. One of the reasons I'm not a big fan of live albums. I like this song though. I think it has a nice vibe. The guitar does a lot of cool chord shaping on it. Like boom, 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 kind of moving through the chords, starting from the lowest note, rising up. The vocal line is nicely done alongside it. But what really stands out to me on this one, it's the sound of everything, the production. The vocals sound too close to the microphone, maybe. The guitar also sounds too loud. We had some clipping on the vocals at one point. It doesn't have that pristine production that we have seen on all the other tracks. This almost sounds like someone recorded this part on their phone and then uploaded it. It's kind of raw. That also gives it a little bit of character, though. It allows it to stand apart from the rest of the album. I believe this is the only track on the album, too, that is just Jorge. The rest of the songs definitely have a band playing with him, but this is obviously just one dude on his guitar and singing. Maybe the production is designed to put a focus on that. Maybe it's to kind of get rid of this produced veneer and kind of return it down to what it is. It's just a live show. I don't know. It's interesting. It's almost as if at the end of a film, the camera begins to pan out and you see the boom mic, and then all of the green screen stuff fades out and it's the green paint and blocks and all that stuff. And then you kind of zoom out more and you see all the personnel working on it, and then the director walks in front of the film, in front of the camera, and that's what it kind of feels like. For a moment, all of the fantastical elements of the art, everything coming together is removed. The curtain is opened and we see what it is for what it is. It's almost as if at the end of a magic trick, the magician immediately shows you how it's done. The magic dissipates and now it's just knowledge. Almost as if through this whole time we had become immersed in this. I had certainly become immersed in this performance to the point that, as I mentioned, even though I stated several times that I had been told this is a live recording and I knew it was a live recording, the production on it just never feels like it. It kind of escapes me on a subconscious level. It was a little shocking there at the end to hear the clapping. Almost as if I am now pulled out of the immersion and I see it for what it is now. I think I'm coming around to the production, assuming this is all intentional. I mean, even if it's not, it might just be my headcanon at this point because I like it so much. But it ends up working rather well. Another thing I really love about this is the extension of dynamics. It's something harder to do with a full band because you really have to compose every little bit of it. You need everybody on the same page at the same time, doing it in unison, which means it all needs to be planned out beforehand. But for something like this, a solo performance, you have complete control over everything being played. And so we have time being stretched out in places. We have these wild, huge volume shifts in places. It is somebody expressing themselves through all of the dynamic qualities of writing, not just the chords, not just the melody, but how do I want to say these words? What kind of inflection, what kind of volume and presence, what kind of lightness and sleight of hand? It's beautiful the way that he just absolutely commands the space in this song, sometimes filling it, sometimes allowing it to exist, sometimes stretching it like putty before allowing it to snap back into place and locking back into that original tempo. I don't quite have a read on the emotional side of this one, though. Yeah. Maybe someone else can give some insight into that. What did you feel while listening to this? What kind of story were you told? I'm going to hit some lyrics and see if that can point me in any direction, though. And then that'll be the end of this video. Pushing close to probably 3:45, which is a lengthy one. I'm just going to read it all. It's short. I saw you arrive, and just like that, untie my mask. I left the costume in a corner. Show's over now. My heart just let go, and the curtains fell. Meanwhile, somewhere else, 2 other threads got weaved in another loom. The curtain falling would be the end of a show. Falling is kind of a weird word for that. I mean, is that the phrase? Curtains are drawn. No, that's the opening of it. The curtains fall is an idiom. Yeah, it's okay. It's the end of something in general. Okay. See, I was thinking of them like literally falling, but it could just be them closing up at the end of a show. I don't know. That in retrospect, I'm like, duh, why did I even think otherwise? I was just taking it very literally, trying to approach the metaphor through the literal, and that doesn't always make sense. Like we talked about earlier, that kind of comes full circle, isn't it? Weird turn of phrases that kind of don't make sense and we don't really know where they came from. You really have to look up the origin of the phrase to figure out why it means what it means. All right, so the curtain falls. Show's over. The story is over. Now, stories are something that you can weave together. It's a lot of threads. We actually talk about plot points as threads when we discuss stories literarily, analytically. And so what he's saying here is one story ends, but another one begins. And he talks specifically about 2 other threads. A lot of this album has been about relationships between 2 people. Even right here, we have a you arriving. You take off my mask. It is a you and an I. It's 2 people here also. But I think this is an interesting song to wrap an album up, to wrap a show up on. And I had mentioned that to me, it feels like a pulling back of the curtain to kind of see the magic behind the art from the production side of things. But I didn't really think that my curtain thing was going to lean into this even more. There's a lot of elements of putting on a show. I wonder then if he sees some of these stories as just shows, just performances. Maybe all of these stories in here about the 2 people are different vignettes influenced by his life. Maybe they're completely made up, totally fictitious. Here at the end, though, when the show's over, he says the curtains fall, I take off my costume, and I go. Somewhere else, someone starts. 2 other people start a new story. There's a lot of ways to read into this. The way that I think I want to take it, though, is that the somewhere else could be you, could be me. We're all a part of the story of Earth, of humanity. Anyone can pick up the next big story. I mean, after all, Jorge was, what was this? A medicine dude. He studied medicine. And then he got fully dedicated to music. His life didn't seem like it was going to be someone who would release dozens of albums, but it is now. Anyone's story can start anywhere. And he felt that this chapter was over in his life. I wonder if maybe he felt that at this point he could hope to inspire someone else to chase some artistic dreams to, or any kind of dream that would allow them to tell a story that was worth telling. I mean, after all, a lot of these songs in here are about the here and the now. The future is uncertain, the past is full of pain. Feel the pain and move on. Start something today that's worthwhile and meaningful. That's what I get out of a lot of these songs. Maybe this is the final commandment. I'm done with this story. Someone else is going to start it next. Doesn't state who it is, doesn't state where it will happen. Could be anyone. Are you willing to start the first chapter of your story right now? It's a call to make sure that you're not living a boring, ordinary life that doesn't have much meaning to it. I can get behind that. Be the main character in your story. Those are my thoughts. Jorge Drexler's Amar la Trama. Let me know what you thought of this track. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on, you can tell me how poor or maybe good my Spanish pronunciation is. I did skip a few that I knew I was going to just absolutely trip over, but I think I did pretty good on most of these. Do you have your own thoughts, opinions, perspectives, takes on any of this, your own interpretations of these songs? Please put all of that in the comments section and anything else you'd like to add, honestly. Above the comments in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, though. Well, tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream. We have, I think, only 8 songs scheduled to check out. And, otherwise, we just chit-chat. It's a chill time. We talk about music. We talk about whatever comes up, sometimes text, sometimes language. I don't know if you've noticed in here, but language is an interesting thing that pops up on my mind often. It's just real chill, laid back, get to hear some new music, converse with cool people. If you can make it, I highly suggest you do. Otherwise, I usually have the VOD up of that same day, so you can watch the stream, not live. And then Monday, of course, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to do next week's theme, check out some more typical reaction stuff. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.